All right, everyone, welcome to the Tuesday edition of Reality Check. It's here on the home of Black Talk Media. It's none other than WURD, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Welcome to the Tuesday edition. Good morning to everyone out there. I'm Charles Ellison. I'm your host, executive producer, also creator of Reality Check here on WURD. Go to @EllisonReport on Twitter.com. Also hashtag reality check, hashtag reality check, or hashtag word on politics for more analysis, more substance about these 2020 elections. We got politics at the home of Black Talk Media, WURD. You're not going to get that anywhere else, but hashtag word on politics. You can check that, and more to come. You know, we're working on it. More to come, not just on Twitter, but on Instagram as well. Facebook.com/forward, of course. Many of you watching us on our Facebook live stream at facebook.com/forward. So definitely appreciate folks who continue to listen and had some great discussion going on yesterday. Great thoughts and reflections and people's perspectives on a number of issues. Really appreciate that. Appreciate people who are listening and calling in as well. Want to continue that conversation. So we're actually waiting on, we had a guest who was scheduled at the top of the 10 o'clock hour, so we're waiting on him. It was supposed to be New York State Assemblyman Michael Alexander Blake. Michael Blake is supposed to be joining us shortly. At least that's what we were told. He created the first and only My Brother's Keeper education program in the country. And it's the first and only statewide My Brother's Keeper education program. That was in the state of New York. And in fact, we have him on. Assembly member Michael Blake is joining us. He is here on Reality Check Tuesday edition. Assemblyman, how are you doing, sir? Good to talk with you.
Great to talk to you. How you doing this morning? Good morning, everybody.
All right, good. To, it's been a minute, and always good to share some thoughts with you. So, you know, real quick, in New York, and you representing parts of New York City, just want to get a sense of, you know, how things are managing. Because at one time, New York was the epicenter of the pandemic, of the pandemic globally, and definitely was the major hot zone nationwide. Things have calmed down since, but how is that now in New York City? What's the condition like? And I know people are bracing for the winter. How's that going?
Charles, I appreciate the question. It's you know, and not just in New York, but my home of the Bronx, where you know we had the highest death rate of anywhere in the city, enduring challenges around poverty, and the rate being so high because of the long-standing health disparities that exist among our people, being the most unhealthy county in New York, as well as the over-representation of phenomenal healthcare workers and first responders and essential workers itself who couldn't sit at home. They couldn't do that work remotely. So it was a challenge. But, you know, we came together. We created the Bronx Community Relief Effort, you know, focused on 8 different efforts around food security, technology, education, small business relief, $15 million raised and gotten back out to the community. But, you know, there's more work to be done. And so as people are around the country, we're asking people to be safe. I'm actually campaigning in Florida. Been here since Saturday. Still telling people be safe. Got my mask on. Got my Biden-Harris mask. You know, having social distancing. Had a shop talk last night in that same way. I want people to understand what we experienced in New York. We don't want you to experience it in your home.
That's right. That's right. Assemblymember Michael Blake is also vice chair at large for the Democratic National Committee for the DNC. And obviously you're working very closely with the Biden-Harris presidential campaign. You're going from state to state. You're there in the battleground of Florida. Talk about the conditions on the ground in Florida. And I know there are a lot of concerns, a lot of worries about voter suppression in states like that. How severe is that?
Well, you know, the concerns are truly because of the rhetoric and action of Trump, Pence, and Governor DeSantis, and all that they're trying to do. Because it's not just what happens when you arrive to vote. It's the conditions before that and the challenges that surround that. I had the opportunity to visit 3 different early vote sites yesterday, and the energy was remarkable. And I was able to chat with my mom on the phone because, like most New Yorkers, most Caribbeans from New York, they retired to Florida. So she's in Ocala, and she said for the first time she can remember, there were lines for early voting. There was about 350,000 people who did early voting on yesterday, which was just powerful. Broke records throughout Florida. But however, while I was there, and shout out to our many local leaders, was hanging out with some of our congressional members and others. There was one sign outside of Kendall Library where it said, your ID is optional, not mandatory. Even that kind of language, we immediately turned to our colleagues and said, we can't allow this kind of confusion there. So what we've done is we have a national voter protection effort. We have our national voter protection hotline. We have a Florida-specific one as well. So for everyone across the country, whether if you're in Pennsylvania, Florida, or any other state, iwillvote.com, iwillvote.com is the website we want everyone to be aware of. So if you have any questions or concerns around voting, you can mobilize in that way.
iwillvote.com. Definitely check that out. And that's for even folks in the battleground state of Pennsylvania as well who are listening, but people from other states who are listening to this program here on WURD and others. We're talking now, if you're just now tuning in, we're talking with New York State Assemblyman Michael Blake. He represents the 79th district in the state of New York, and that is more specifically the Bronx, one of the boroughs of New York City, but he's also vice chair at large for the Democratic National Committee, joining us here on Reality Check. Talk about the key differences, if you will, Assemblyman, about the between, as it relates to black people, as it relates to the black electorate, the black community, the two key presidential platforms between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because there's been a lot of conversation there. There's obviously been a lot of conversation over the past week about black male voters. I want to get into that in a few moments, but what are those key differences? Because there is this larger debate about the Trump presidency and what's happened over the past several years, how much he's done for black people, whether it's through HBCUs, whether it's through support for black businesses. We're having a conversation over the past day or two about are his tax cuts or his tax policy, is that beneficial for black people versus Biden's tax policy? What are the key differences there in your mind?
Trump asked everyone 4 years ago, and specifically the black community, what do you have to lose? And unfortunately, the very clear answer, our lives, our businesses, our schools, our opportunities for justice, our way of life have all been lost and will continue to be lost as black folk because of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. You've had unemployment rates at a staggering level for black men, 29.8%. And just for context, and obviously, Charles, you know this, unemployment is when people are actively seeking work. So the numbers are actually worse than what we're talking through here. We talked through the notion of how young black boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended than their white peers. But yet Trump and Davos revoked the rules that protected black children from racial bias in school discipline. They talk about what they've done around HBCUs and criminal justice. However, let's be very clear, Justice and First Step Act, that came from movement from the Senate and from congressional members. So give credit to Senator Kamala Harris and happy birthday to Kamala today. So those are the things that we want people to be mindful of how we've been hurt. Now, on the flip side, when Joe Biden is saying very clearly that when he is president and when he gets elected 2 weeks from now, let's have a focus on black business by raising the Minority Business Development Agency to be an effort where you can invest directly in businesses and having instead of a director, an assistant secretary. Why does that matter? Because if you get more access to capital and contracts to black businesses, then you can hire more of our people. Let's talk through how you have to have student loan forgiveness so that you don't have people making decisions in our communities about taking a job purely for paying their bills.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk through how you can have $400 billion in procurement, again, so you can get more money on the street to our communities in a very direct way. We talk about health care, staying on your parents' plan until age 26 versus having it revoked, making sure that we don't continue to have a scenario where we're saying, I cannot breathe. I can't breathe either because of police brutality or I can't breathe because of COVID. And so the responsibility and the comparison is this. Black folk, to our people, the choice we have is very clear. Do we want to live? Do we want to thrive? Do we want to survive? That is what's at stake in this election, up and down the ticket, from the presidency and the vice presidency on down. And so if we want those opportunities, the comparison is clear. We got to vote for Biden.
How do you respond to, when the president says, okay, hey, you know what, but I've done more for example, historically black colleges and universities than the previous Obama administration, or I've done more for black communities through opportunity zones. How do we, because we get into these microeconomic debates or arguments or exchanges about things that he's done, and I'm not sure that there's a really resonant, punchy response or counter to what he's saying. Like, oh, I've done more for HB, that's sort of key word or key phrase there for, when you say HBCUs, that's like a buzzword. Oh yeah, he's done a lot for black folks. And when you have that conversation with many in the community, they are under that impression, oh, he must have invested more in HBCUs than the Obama administration. Considering that there's higher enrollment. Well, I mean, HBCUs are going through a hard time like every other college institution during pandemic, but black enrollment have been increasing sharply to HBCUs over the years. So how do you respond to, or how do you counter those types of issues when the president brings them up?
Donald Trump always has been and continues to be a con man who is a damn liar that lies to black people every single day. This is a man who his family sued because they wouldn't give access to affordable housing to black folks. A man whose father was arrested at a KKK rally. A man who took out a full-page ad calling for the death penalty to Central Park Five. A man, while still infectious with COVID-19, had a rally at the White House for Blexit to have black people who he paid their campaign to show up to try to convince people about leaving the party. So once again, our lives don't matter to Donald Trump. So the notion of, well, I've done more. Again, absolute absurdity. The White House HBCU initiative, an effort that we amplified in the Obama-Biden administration. The continuity of funding it, you don't get reward points just because you continue to pay for something that someone else did. When you talk about what's happening for businesses, again, let's be clear on the facts. The funding itself for Minority Business Development Agency, through SBA, all those different efforts, tremendously higher under the Obama-Biden administration. And let's be very clear, this year, why are 40% of black businesses not returning? Because of the rules in the payroll protection program in the relief bill did not allow for barbershops and beauty salons and restaurants and those in the cash economy to have access to the fund. So when someone is telling you, I've been better for you and better in these regards, it is easy for a con man to lie in your face. Now, equally out here around criminal justice, they'll try to say, well, Joe Biden had the crime bill and Kamala Harris was a prosecutor. Well, help me to understand this. Senator Harris, who was an incredible attorney, decided to then utilize and take actions as a prosecutor that actually helped our particular community address criminal justice reform. But beyond that, became an attorney general, a United States senator is going to be the vice president, who worked on the First Step Act, which Trump tried to take credit on. Joe Biden, who helped lead the effort when we addressed crack versus powder cocaine in the Obama-Biden administration to go from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1, led the Recovery Act, and continue to create opportunities around 21st century.
Do you feel like that 94 crime bill discussion is sort of a blind spot for Joe Biden? It just
No.
seems to constantly come up, and then I'm not sure if the larger black electorate or many or segments of the black electorate, particularly black men, are understanding the role that Joe Biden played at that time. And you know, a lot of people asked there were a lot of black political leaders that were asking for something like the '94 crime bill at that time. I remember I was working on Capitol Hill at that time.
Yeah, to your question, no. And I think the irony here is this is when you're talking to a con man on the street and they have nothing else to say. So they'll just try to holler at somebody about, well, this is what happened 30 years ago and try to give you no facts.
Yeah.
There were a lot of, as you just mentioned, there were a lot of CBC members that were pushing for that. There were a lot of members of Congress that were pushing for that because of what was happening in the country. So because of his role in Congress, his leadership post, he moved forward on something that many of the country was asking for. But equally, let's say this. Could you absolutely recognize ramifications afterwards that if you could do things over again, would you change that? No question about that.
Right, right.
Let's not act like what's happening right now should be ignored. So in 2020, here is your decision when you go to the polls. Do you rock with a man who has endured pain, empathy, lost a wife, multiple children, endured that, but then did a Recovery Act, health care bill, and move forward to say, I'm going to have the proposal that would lead to the greatest level of funding to black communities and address what's happening around criminal justice reform at a scale that no other president has proposed? Or a man who literally, in the last few weeks, $421 million in debt, so you don't know where that's owed to, has had people all around him going to jail, has led to 200,000 Americans losing their lives, and despite that, called all this a hoax. And don't forget the Central Park Five. If we want to talk about history, when Donald Trump took out that full-page ad calling for the death of the Central Park Five, but you going to talk to me about Joe Biden? Please. So when we having that reality check, right? That's what's at stake for black folks. Stop trying to be confused and played by con men.
You know, there's one other question that I have before we let you go in about 2 or 3 minutes, Assemblyman, and it's about K through 12 education. And I know that that's been a passion of yours over the years. It's an issue that you've worked on for quite a long time, whether it's alongside or with or inside the Obama administration, or definitely in the Bronx and in New York. I wonder why that issue is not coming up in this presidential campaign, considering the crisis that households are going through, particularly black households. Many low-income households are going through adapting to remote learning, lack of broadband, lack of universal broadband, or the total disappearance of such. Why isn't that coming up? I mean, we don't even hear it coming up in the debates. Like, I'm not even. Is the Biden-Harris campaign? Are you all bringing that up? It seems as if that every now and then when we do hear about education, and this was the same mistake from 2016. K through 12 education never came up as a topic, yet it's in a crisis state.
Well, so one, do we bring it up? Absolutely. In the vision of cradle to the career, because as we understand, there's the broader dialogue of not just having someone pass a test, but actually learning. And we're watching this in real time when Joe Biden talks about, when he is president, addressing the internet divide and broadband challenges. It's impossible to have remote learning if you can't get online, and the dynamics that exist there. The deeper reflection of what happens around the broad education divide, you can't learn if you're hungry. And so the challenges around food security in so many of our schools and communities itself. The dynamic around how schools are the primary child care center itself as well. And so when we talk about why is this not being discussed, it is another reminder of the failures of Donald Trump, in which they want to avoid talking about the truth. Think about this. For the debate happening on Thursday night, it was reported on yesterday that the Trump campaign was asking and pleading to not discuss COVID, not discuss the economy, not discuss the challenges happening domestically. It should only be about foreign policy. So if you are so confident in your record, why are you running away from it? And so when we talk about K through 12, but then not just K through 12, but beyond, the vision of the Biden-Harris administration is how do we go from the cradle to the career? Not only do we help you go to school and graduate from school, but how do we ensure that you are able to afford it along the way? And this is the broader vision of what would happen within this administration. As opposed to focusing on suspension, as Trump and DeVos are doing, we will focus on graduations and retention. And that is the different kind of approach we want to have of schooling, of education, and promotion for our young people.
We've been talking with Michael Blake. He is Vice Chair at Large for the Democratic National Committee, also a third-term Assembly member in the New York State Assembly. He represents the 79th District in New York City, in the Bronx, New York, and he's been joining us here on Reality Check, our Tuesday edition. Go to @Mr. Mike Blake on social media, on Twitter, if you'd like to reach him there or see what he's up to. He's joining us here on Reality Check Tuesday. Assemblyman, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Always, Sean. Good to talk to you.
All right, good luck to you. Take care. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back on the other side, we're scheduled to talk with Derek Hyra. Derek Hyra is an urban sociologist, a scholar at American University, head of its Metropolitan Policy Center. We're going to talk about demographic shifts that are happening in cities during pandemic, coming up next here on Reality Check Tuesday, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. But let's be clear. This election is about building this country back better. And that's exactly what Joe and I will do. Bring back critical supply chains so the future is made in America. Build on the Affordable Care Act. And finally, offer caregivers the dignity, the respect, and the pay they deserve. We'll protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. Root out systemic racism in our justice system, and pass a new Voting Rights Act that will ensure every voice is heard and every voice is counted. We have a chance to choose a better future for our country.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Joe Biden fought hard to pass Obamacare. It gave over 20 million Americans access to health care and protected people with pre-existing conditions from greedy insurance companies. But Trump and Republicans want to get rid of it. Even in the middle of a pandemic, we can't let that happen. Protect your health care. Vote Biden. Our lives depend on it.
Paid for by Ask Me People, which is responsible for the content of this ad. AskMePeople.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
WURD Radio presents the following information to help you navigate the up-and-coming election. Still concerned about COVID-19 and voting in person? Pennsylvania has you covered with mail-in ballots. Simply submit a completed ballot by mail. So long as you request that mail-in ballot between now and October 27th, go to votespa.com and apply for your mail-in ballot today. When your ballot arrives, read it carefully and follow the instructions to complete it and return it. You can also track and confirm that your County Board of Elections has received the mail-in ballot by going to votespa.com. For more information on how to vote in Pennsylvania, visit states.aarp.org/Pennsylvania. Vote early. WURD Radio presents the following information to help you navigate the up-and-coming election. Stay informed and vote. For more from Charles Ellison, tune in Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. or visit wordradio.com.
Always Best Care is a great place to work.
Flexibility,
Leadership.
purpose,
Great benefits.
there's never a dull moment.
Diversity, inclusion, compasión.
We love our jobs. If you're looking for a great place to work, you can join our compassionate Team Green. You can apply online at teamgreenabc.com or call 267-909-9248.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and wordradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. We are scheduled to talk with Derek Hyra of the Metropolitan Policy Center at American University. We don't have him just yet, so we'll just wait on him. We're just talking with Assembly Member, New York State Assembly Member Michael Blake, also Vice Chair of the Democrat Vice Chair at Large, the Democratic National Committee, talking about the differences between the Biden and Trump campaigns with respect to Black communities. Just kind of like what exactly those platforms are about. We're probably expecting to hear a lot of that in the debate between the two. It's the last presidential debate that is happening this Thursday. And well, at least we know a debate is taking place this Thursday. We don't know. Anything could change between now and the next 48 hours, particularly since the Trump campaign is demanding, well, at least a letter from the Trump campaign's chair demanding that the focus be on foreign policy, because they said that at one point it was promised that the focus would be on foreign policy, and suddenly there's a lot of domestic issues that are coming up. Well, you shouldn't have skipped out on the previous debate and created that separate town hall format. Like, then maybe you would have been talking about just foreign policy. So Trump administration obviously wanting to spin a foreign policy narrative to say that it's had some foreign policy wins, and it was looking forward to that. But they had submitted a letter to the Presidential Debate Commission yesterday saying that they had concerns about it. So kind of setting the stage for a potential cancellation or a potential pullout, and we've seen that before, of this presidential campaign. Joining us now is Derek Hira. He is a urban sociologist, professor of sociology and demography, also head executive director of the Metropolitan Policy Center at American University. Go to, I believe it's american.edu for more information on that. At Derek Hira, Hyra, on social media if you'd like to learn more about him. Reach him there. DerekHyra.com to also learn more about him. And his last book was Race, Class, and Politics in the Cappuccino City, looking at Washington, D.C., the changes and the gentrification that was taking place here. We've had him here on Reality Check before. It's good to have him back. It's been a long while. It's good to hear his voice. Derek, how are you doing?
Charles, doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, we need to have you back on more often, so I appreciate this. There's so much going on. I know we're both busy. But I wanted to talk to you about urban flight. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of thoughts about whether or not major urban flight or an exodus from cities has taken place during pandemic. What are we saying? What are you saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's controversial. It's tough to really know exactly what has happened, but it is clear that people living in urban areas are looking for more space. It's clear in a place like New York City, people who were living on the Upper East Side, Upper West Side when the pandemic hit, they bounced. They bounced to the suburbs. They bounced to second homes in Long Island. So we are seeing a higher vacancy rate in some of the major urban areas, but it's yet to be determined whether, if there's a vaccine, when there's a vaccine, will we have a return? And what does that really mean for property values, for gentrification rates over the long term? We just don't know. But I'm hedging that, yes, people may have wanted to get out of the density, try to social distance safely, try to get a place where they have a yard where their kids can go out and play while we're kind of on this lockdown mode. But I think that once that ends and there is a vaccine, people will likely return. But the other thing, related to the pandemic, it's not just a health pandemic. I mean, it's an economic crisis. We have massive unemployment. And so it's not just the demographic shifts that may change property values and gentrification rates, but also we have to think about unemployment, the inability of people to make their rent on time or their mortgage payment. And we've had a moratorium on evictions that will lead us up to December 31st. But when that ends, then what takes place? And again, that's something we just don't know.
Yeah, it's still too early to tell exactly how bad or severe this has been, especially in that you're right, we may go into a new phase of this once we get to the expiration of that moratorium on rental evictions, and some evictions have been still kind of taking place, landlords trying to force that. Has there been before we get into deeper discussions too about like specific demographic groups, the impact on like vulnerable, low-income Black and brown communities in cities? Before pandemic, we had just these insane, these like obscene rental rates and house pricing in a lot of major cities, whether it was in DC. San Francisco is obviously was ground zero for that kind of high real estate speculation, and to the point where even people making six-figure salaries, they couldn't handle living in San Francisco. Six figures in San Francisco was basically kind of being poor, and even Philly seeing a lot of those changes as well. Did we see real estate values or pricing? Did we see that drop or decrease during the pandemic? Have rents dropped or decreased during the pandemic? Has there been any change there? Maybe some stabilization as far as those rates go?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, I don't think we've seen a tremendous drop yet. We have seen a stabilization in median rental prices, median home prices in some of the large urban areas, but we haven't seen dramatic drops. And so, we really don't know what will happen. But, you kind of mentioned the prior. We to understand what may happen or what is happening during this pandemic and what may happen with a post-pandemic recovery, I think it's good to take a step back and think about, we just went through a recession. We went through the Great Recession from 2009 to 2007 to 2009, and we had a recovery from that, but it was greatly unequal in racial terms, where, the employment rates when they came back, the salary rates, the wealth gap between blacks and whites widened during the Great Recession recovery period, which we could say was 2010 to 2019. We also had a tremendous amount of gentrification happening during that time period. I mean, even before the Great Recession, we have, in the last 20 years, we had this back to the city movement. We have people that normally would stay in the suburbs moving to urban areas, and that is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on real estate markets. And real estate developers, they want to buy low, sell high. So where do they look to gentrify? They look to low-income communities of color. And when investments get poured into those places, there is displacement. And we've seen that in the Washington, D.C. region in the last 10, 15 years. So, and then now let's get back to your point, the pandemic. Yeah. The pandemic has stabilized markets, but you know what? There are real estate investors with deep pockets who have capital, who have access to the lowest credit rate, interest rates now in history. I mean, think about where a 30-year fixed mortgage is right now. It's like at 2.1%, or that's for a 15. For the 20, it's like at 2.5, 2.8%. Those are the lowest rates in history. So people who can get loans right now can get very low interest loans. They're going to start investing. Big real estate corporations, investment real estate trusts, they are going to start to put money. If the urban markets start to decline, they're going to wait to the bottom and gobble them up, and then wait and build, and then see if people come back to those places. So I think that even if there is a pause in rent increases or property value increases, I think people are still going to be threatened during the pandemic and definitely post the pandemic in terms of gentrification and vulnerability of displacement.
Yeah. That's that vulnerability of displacement, and the vulnerability. Expound on that a little bit more, Derek, especially when you're looking at and you're in the D.C. metropolitan area. You're looking at the changes that have been taking place. You've written about it extensively. The changes that have been taking place in a place like Washington, D.C., once proudly known as Chocolate City. That's not the case anymore. It's very much Cappuccino City, as you've called it in the title of your book. We've already black populations and to an extent brown populations in cities like Washington, D.C., Philly. We're already going through some very dramatic and destructive changes before a pandemic. How severe is it now in the context of that gentrification and now, kind of things slowing down? But a lot of those populations are stuck. It's not like they have the luxury of moving out to the suburbs or rural areas to get away from that density, to maintain social distancing. They're just stuck where they are.
Yeah, and I think there's two levels of vulnerability. One is economic vulnerability, and the other is health. And when we think about low-income, middle-income, working-income communities of color in the D.C. area, but also in other urban markets, those communities are more likely to have frontline workers who aren't social distancing at home, actually have to go into the grocery store, have to go onto the construction site. And so the rates of COVID are higher in communities of color, and in part because these communities are in economic positions where they have to be out and about while we're facing this pandemic. So there's health vulnerability. Also, on the economic side, there has been massive layoffs and unemployment, which again is disproportionately affecting communities of color. Well, so if you don't have a job, how are you going to make your mortgage? How are you going to make your rent? So then you become vulnerable for displacement, which then can have a health impact. So, there's a lot of different levels of vulnerability related to the pandemic and also related to the economic crisis that we're facing. And like I said, I think another part of it is that there are real estate companies that do have access to credit and capital. And you mentioned the D.C. region. What's happening? Well, when I look around the D.C. region right now, I see Southwest, I see Southeast, and I see cranes up all over the place. And these are real estate investments that may have gotten their financing before the pandemic, but also during the pandemic. These developments, and a lot of them are luxury developments in low and middle income communities of color, are going up. And the units in these developments are not designed for the people who live in these communities. It's to attract new people. So again, there may have been a pause with rent prices and home prices, but I still see credit and capital and large investments flowing into communities of color that are, again, making them vulnerable on another level for displacement.
So as far as solutions, how should, once we get into that pandemic or post-pandemic recovery phase, and it's going to be a while, because we're still waiting for a vaccine to help us through it, right? And that's not going to happen until sometime like late next year, maybe, at best. What do cities do, particularly with slimmer budgets, Derek? And because this has been a recession as well. It's been a pandemic recession, and at one point it felt like a depression. So do cities act on their own, or how can cities act on their own? Do they act as regions, right? So like whether it's a DC or a Philly or a Baltimore, it's not, you can't do it alone. Hey, you know what, we've got to set up a regional model here, find partners in surrounding counties to handle the type of distress that has escalated as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, I think that, it's going to take multiple levels of government. Cities and counties and towns are not going to be able to help their populations on their own. The resources aren't there. It's going to take a collaboration of states, but also the federal government. When we are in a recession, and we are still in a recession, the federal government comes to help. We've had about $2 trillion already deployed. A lot of that money was in the Payment Protection Program, almost $700 billion to make sure small businesses could get through this tough time period. But we know that that's not enough. We know that unemployment is still climbing. And so we're going to need another round of capital injection coming from the federal government. We know right now that there's a lot of conflict between the Senate and the House and the President, and it doesn't seem like a deal is going to get cut before the election. But post-November 3rd, Congress better act and needs to act to deploy trillions of dollars to the American public to get us through this. So, a lot of that money, though, is going to be filtered down, not to individuals. Some of it will. Some of it will go directly to small businesses, but some of it will go to states and then go to cities directly, and then they've got to figure out how to spend that money. I would say we've done somewhat of a decent job trying to help small businesses, but, what we haven't done is we haven't helped homeowners. We haven't helped renters. Right? Where is the injection of capital? Yes, we've put a moratorium out there to prevent people from getting evicted, But, when this moratorium ends, they're going to still have to come up with all that money for the back rent. Well, if they're unemployed, where's that money? They don't have it. So we do need the federal government to deploy money for rent stabilization, maybe to help people make their mortgage payments. But we also, I said the vulnerability, even with all that, is still going to be there in minority communities, with real estate developers looking to buy at a lower rate where they think they can upgrade the housing stock and get a new population in. So we've got to put money for affordable housing. That's something that the Bowser administration here in D.C. is committed to, a $100 million housing production trust fund. Most cities don't have that amount. Most states don't have that. I think Virginia, their trust fund for the state level is like $14 million. For D.C., it's $100 million. So, I think we're going to need cities to really think about, there's a lot of talk about defund the police, right? We have been through a tumultuous time period with protests related to systemic racism and police aggression. And I am all for changing the budgets of police departments and getting them to act differently in minority communities, especially impoverished ones. But we've got to go beyond that. We've got to think about, if we defund the police, do we actually fund the social safety net in terms of our housing infrastructure? We have public housing that has over $70 billion of back repair. So are cities, states, and the federal government going to think about injecting money into our affordable housing infrastructure that hasn't been upgraded in quite a long time? So there are policy actions that could be done, and I think that we've got to think beyond policing, beyond small businesses, and think about the affordable housing infrastructure for our country if we want to prevent people from being vulnerable in their own communities, in their own homes.
We've been talking with Derek Hyra, the American University professor, head of the Metropolitan Policy Center at American University. Go to derekhyra.com for more information on him and on his books as well. Good reads, by the way, and at Derek Hyra on social media. He's joining us here on Reality Check Tuesday edition. We're going to have him back a little bit more often. I promise you that, Derek. It's really good speaking with you. Thanks for the insights.
All right, Charles. Take care. Thanks.
Take care. We'll be in touch. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back on the other side, phone lines are open at 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check Tuesday. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Pico has many ways to help you lower your energy usage and save money at home. Here's one. If your heating and cooling system is more than 20 years old, it may be time for your contractor to replace it with a high-efficiency Energy Star certified model. You'll get a rebate from Pico and save on your monthly electric bill. You'll find a list of new heating and cooling system rebates at pico.com/rebates. Or you can call 1-888-5-PICO-SAVE for all the details. Plus, find instant discounts on smart thermostats and more at pico.com/marketplace. There's free shipping on orders over $49.
Man, this coronavirus has us all moving differently.
No doubt. Like washing our hands more and social distancing with the crew. I'm always telling people to give me 6 feet. We're here, Grandma.
There's my babies. Good to see you got your mask on.
Wear a mask. Stop the spread. For more information, visit www.pa.gov/COVID.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Reverend Tyler, with November 3rd around the corner, do you know how you'll be voting this year?
Dr. Callahan, I requested my mail-in ballot, and I'm returning it the day it comes in the mail.
That's perfect, because we can't leave anything to chance this year.
Already received your mail-in ballot? You're just a few simple steps away from turning your mailbox into a ballot box. Here's how. After selecting your candidates, place your marked ballot into the small secrecy envelope and seal it. It's a 2-envelope process, so then you'll place the small secrecy envelope into the larger one. Make sure to seal that one too. Sign and date it, and then it's as simple as dropping it in your mailbox, no postage necessary, or returning it to your county election office. And if you still want to sign up to vote by mail or find out where to drop off your mail-in ballot, visit votespa.com.
I'm not waiting until November 3rd. I'm returning my mail-in ballot the day it comes in the mail.
Or you can return your ballot to your county election office.
I've got my plan. Make your plan to vote today.
Paid for by Power Interfaith.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Reality Check here on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD Radio. That was Corey Ellison. She played that last night, in fact. I just from scratch, that was Corey Ellison's adaptation of Wish by Diplo featuring Trippie Redd, and she made a fresh piano cut out of Trippie Redd's voice from scratch. So I was just amazed by that. And so I just taped it and I had to share it with everyone there. So just when you hear the song, just check it out. It's called Wish, Wish by Diplo, but he puts Trippie Redd as the lyricist right on the track. It's not, the original song is not piano, but she made a piano version out of it just from scratch. And I thought, oh, wow, I got to share this with the audience because it was just so dope. So I figured y'all might enjoy that too. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Phone lines are open. We'll be heading into the 11 o'clock hour. We're supposed to be talking with Lenny McAllister. Lenny McAllister is coming up next. He has been newly appointed as the executive director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. So they just announced that last week. So congrats to Lenny McAllister. He's going to join us to talk about that appointment and the future of charter schools in Pennsylvania. There's a big debate still about that, and that's continuing our conversation here on this program about education, because no one else is talking about it, especially during the election. No one's been talking about K through 12 education, which I frankly find weird and just a small bit offensive, particularly considering the crisis, the education crisis that folks are going through. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. We actually have Junior Lee on our Facebook live stream giving some thoughts with respect to K through 12. I guess that was based off of our earlier discussion we had with Assemblymember Michael Blake, DNC Vice Chair at Large. Junior Lee saying pre-K through 12 should be reimagined. Virtual learning has been a great option and will continue to be offered when schools open up. I wonder if the Biden administration will be open to a restructuring of how public schools are conducting education. Junior Lee also saying maybe it's time to adjust our perspective on gentrification, black extermination, he puts in parentheses, and take advantage of the future opportunities that rural areas have to offer. Kevin Waters responds back to Junior Lee on that K through 12 question. Virtual learning is not helping. It's necessary because of the pandemic, but students lose the in-person hands-on interaction with their teachers. Assessment is from students who want to be in school. How do I know? I work with them as a counselor. I will say this, virtual learning works, but it depends on the model. It depends on how long the model has been deployed. Because there's a whole lot of like in-person teaching, particularly in public school environments, before pandemic that wasn't working. In fact, it was making the situation much worse, particularly when we talk about the school to prison pipeline. How do we address that? How do we address, because you got all this in-person learning. This is before pandemic was taking place. You have especially black kids going into very destructive school environments, and it's I'm having this conversation directly with a lot of black families who are now making a major decision about, you know what, maybe this remote learning model is not such a bad thing for my child, because now it buffers them against the school to prison pipeline, against unnecessary suspensions, against being unnecessarily targeted or singled out, and and also this buffers them against the bullying, which you're a counselor, Kevin, and and I know a lot of counselors in public schools who are not taking bullying seriously. When they see it happening, they're like, oh, that's just kids being kids, whatever, So, I mean, there's all these destructive habits and behaviors and conduct that are happening in public school systems, in addition to the low performance, like we were talking about the Philadelphia Public School District last week, and the abysmally low reading scores. And so it's like, I mean, that's even with the in-person learning, that's considered good, that's considered productive or progressive in terms of a child's academic performance. So we have to have that conversation. I think, yeah, you do need, that hands-on, on-site, in-person instruction, which is why we're probably going to see a shift towards that hybrid model, that mix of remote learning and also on-site learning, and that's where we need to make broadband universal, right? To have that infrastructure that can support that. But let's be real here. Let's have that real talk about these also the toxic environmental conditions in schools, how a lot of these schools are not healthy places to be in. So, we can talk all we want about, oh, well, we need to have the kids in school because of socialization skills, which I think that conversation, all that's overrated, particularly when you consider how, the psychological impact, the negative psychological impact of those on-site conditions in those public schools. We need to have that conversation. Yeah, public schools are essential, but a lot of public schools just, majority of public schools, based on what we're saying, are just not doing it right. So we've had virtual online remote learning models that have been in existence for quite some time. A lot of public schools are having real trouble trying to adapt to that or trying to deploy those models and systems because a lot of those districts spent so much time being resistant to that change or being resistant to that innovation, that education innovation on the horizon, and trying to understand that model and figuring out ways to integrate that model and make that model more available to students, particularly students in distressed circumstances, because the remote learning model could have came in very handy. At least a perfected or refined remote learning model could have came in very handy for Philadelphia Public School System, for example, dealing with toxic buildings. This was before pandemic. So it's like, okay, we can't keep the students in these toxic, unhealthy buildings. Well, maybe we can, along with universal broadband, maybe we can experiment with, or maybe we can deploy an effective remote learning model. But I've seen that remote learning model work. You shouldn't completely discount it. I think this is the moment, especially when we get past the pandemic, for people to be real creative about those education models. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll be talking with Lenny McAllister, newly appointed executive director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. We're going to talk about the future of education in Pennsylvania, what that means in terms of charter schools, also that ongoing tension and competition between so-called charter schools and public schools, and what Lenny's going to be doing about it in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All right, that's coming up next here on Reality Check, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Dietz & Watson has been making premium meats and artisan cheeses for over 80 years. And when it comes to stacking sandwiches and party platters, they've got something for everyone in the family, like maple honey turkey breast, American cheese, buffalo chicken, and more. So get to your local deli and taste 4 generations of family recipes. With Dietz & Watson on the table, you'll have everyone coming back for seconds and thirds. Dietz & Watson, it's a family thing since 1939.
What's up, Philly? It's Sincerely Sarita. The school year is underway, but never before has that experience come in so many shapes and sizes. Is the education of your child being left to a smattering of clumsy in-person and virtual instruction? The COVID-19 crisis has created a market for untested virtual teaching models lacking true credibility. Maybe it's time to reconsider and exercise your choice. Maybe it's time to check out Commonwealth Charter Academy. Here are the benefits to your family. 1, an online education provided at no cost to you, complete with laptop, headset, and help with internet access. 2, partnership with the market leader in cyber education with a nearly 20-year track record of world-class learning. And 3, delivery of a safe, reliable, and comfortable education experience over the internet directly to the confines of your living room. Visit ccaeducate.me today and discover the gold standard of cyber education. That's ccaeducate.me.
Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. But let's be clear. This election is about building this country back better. And that's exactly what Joe and I will do. Bring back critical supply chains so the future is made in America. Build on the Affordable Care Act. And finally, offer caregivers the dignity, the respect, and the pay they deserve. We'll protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. Root out systemic racism in our justice system, and pass a new Voting Rights Act that will ensure every voice is heard and every voice is counted. We have a chance to choose a better future for our country.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Biden for president.
The WURD Radio newsletter, keeping you informed, engaged, and connected. Sign up by visiting WURDradio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and type your email address under Connect with Us. You'll receive the latest information on WURD Radio, messages from our president and CEO, Sarah Lomax Reese, exclusive articles and multimedia content, and resources. Stay informed with the WURD Radio newsletter. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Independent Black Media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check Tuesday. We're just waiting on Lenny McAllister, newly appointed Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. Go to PACharters.org for more information. So we're just waiting on him. We're just going to open up the phone lines in the meantime. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Want to get your thoughts too. Want to continue to get your thoughts because we need to just sort of get into, electrify this conversation, generate more interest about education, because that's one issue I'm just not hearing discussed on the presidential campaign trail. I doubt it will be discussed in this upcoming debate. It's not on the list of topics. It has not showed up on the list of topics in these presidential debates. K through 12 education, to me, it seems like a no-brainer to bring that conversation up at a time when households, when parents, when students, scholars are going through a real crisis. And so as far as just adapting, in fact, a lot of students, a lot of children have been lost, have been losing not just weeks, but months of, of training, of curriculum, or support, the type of education that they're typically used to during a normal school year. And the pandemic obviously has exposed all these various equity gaps, and nowhere is that more prominent than K through 12 education. We're just not talking about it. We do have Lenny. Okay, we do have Lenny. He is on. He is newly appointed Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. Once again, pacharters.org for more information. Lenny, good morning. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning, child of God. How are you?
All right, good to have you on. Congratulations on the new appointment. So, what does that? First, let's talk about the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools, who they are, what they do. What's the plan moving forward? Particularly in this very unprecedented pandemic environment and the type of impact that's had on K through 12 education.
Well, first of all, thanks again for having me on. PA Coalition of Public Charter Schools basically are public charter schools across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are a member organization. We represent well over 100 charter schools, both cyber charter and brick and mortar charter schools throughout the Commonwealth, including obviously in Philadelphia. And the purpose of our coalition is to ensure that those schools have the support necessary to be innovative, to be proactive, but also reactive to the needs of the students in their schools and those that are on the waiting list and looking to be more involved in the charter school community. We look at everything from how can we support the educators in regards to newest and best methods for education, to what do they need in regards to technological needs, to ensuring that the students that are in those communities have the enriching environments and have the academic rigors necessary to allow them to be successful in life as public school students.
What makes your appointment different, Lenny? How did that come about? Just sort of tapping into you to lead this coalition, particularly at a time like the pandemic. What are you going to do that's going to be different from previous leadership?
I think there's going to be more of a focus on equity across the board. I think too often, Charles, that people that do education as a living, as a lifestyle, or even as a passion, they're focused too much on just the dollars and the cents. And so you end up having this back and forth between traditional public schools and public charter schools and private schools. And there's so much more. As you well know, and you've been talking about this for months now, there's so much more on the line when it comes to particularly communities of color, where we're talking about education, but also employment, also healthcare, also opportunities. These are things that can allow for viability for the long term for people in the communities that we're looking to serve. So part of my focus is going to be tying the educational pursuits that we have within the coalition and our charter school members and tying that to long-term initiatives. For example, there is an anti-racism action that several of our coalition school members are already initiating and moving forward with, so that our students and their families understand this is more than just making sure that they have a quality education. This is ensuring that they have a robust citizenship throughout life, and that their school community is going to be part of that fight to ensure that they have that for the rest of their lives, not just while they're in those doors at their schools.
The big critique of charter schools, Lenny, I know you're very well aware of this debate, is that they draw or siphon off funding and resources from public schools. And so how do you address those concerns, particularly in a big state like Pennsylvania, where there are education funding gaps, where there are concerns over the the unequal distribution of resources and funding for where you have like public schools in a city like Philadelphia that are constantly distressed, that aren't performing well, that don't get the types of resources they have, even though it's a big city public school system, compared to, say, suburban school districts in surrounding counties. How do you address those concerns? What's the explanation for, or how do you say that, hey, no, this isn't happening? Charter schools are a value add, but not a lot of parents, obviously not a lot of policymakers and leaders on the city-state level are convinced.
Well, I first and foremost, I think there needs to be an understanding that charter schools are public schools. They're public charter schools. They're publicly funded. And there is a level of accountability that's still in there. I mean, truth be told, these charters are authorized through the local school boards and then through the Department of Education if there's an appeal process. So it's not as though they're just purely private schools. In fact, they're not private schools at all. These are public charter schools. These are public school students that are involved in these processes. Now, of course, as you well know, Charles, there's a huge fight over education funding across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But I can say, in many instances, charter schools have to do more with less, where there are certain school districts, I can tell you many of them out in the western part of the state where I'm from, as you well know, they get to hang on to a portion of the money even if the student's not in the actual classroom. So the charter school gets part of that tuition paid for, roughly 74 to 75%, and the school district gets to hang on to 25% in many instances, even though the kid's not in the school. As we continue to move forward, we have to make sure that legislators understand the role that charter schools play in improving the communities as well as ensuring that the kids are prepared for the future academically. You know, many lawmakers see the need for school choice, but they are getting caught up in the money fights that we're seeing on a regular basis. And I think that one of the focuses that I'm going to bring to the table is making sure people focus back on the students, particularly the public charter school students that are looking for needs. I mean, we have 40,000 kids on charter waiting list alone in Philadelphia, and we have many more throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We saw that spike up as a result of the pandemic. People are looking for expanded school choice, and it does not mean there has to be winners and losers between traditional public schools and public charter schools. But we have to make sure that more kids win in Pennsylvania so that we can have a more robust future in Pennsylvania.
You know, there is some tension there, however, Lenny, in terms of school choice and charter schools. Isn't there a difference there? Because I talk to charter school projects and initiatives and operations elsewhere in the country, and some of them seem to be distancing themselves from the school choice debate. They feel like it's too politically toxic, a little bit too disruptive, and they feel like they're a bit separate from the school choice paradigm. That what they're offering is much different from school choice, which is, okay, well, let's set up these funding sources or funding pools or vouchers to take say like a black child out of a low-income neighborhood who's in a public school setting, and let's see if we can give them some money to go to a private or parochial school. Do you see that tension? How would you manage that?
There are some tensions in the movement, but I think that it's best, and this is part of my role in this new title, is to have the opportunity to say, listen, we're all part of school choice. We want to provide parents the opportunity to find the best academic avenues for their kids possible. Now, for some, obviously, that might be that they would prefer to have an EITC or OSTC scholarship and go to a private school. But we also see value in public charter schools across the Commonwealth, and there's something to be said about standing up for those schools and standing up for those families that make the most of those opportunities while still looking at the traditional public schools and saying, what can we do to improve education there as well? I think that there are people, again, Charles, they get into the fights over money without realizing that if you're truly about self-determination, whether it's across the Commonwealth or across the nation, if you're talking about poor and disadvantaged families having self-determination when it comes to the schools for their kids, school choice is a value add for all of us, and public charter schools play a role in that value add.
We're talking with Lenny McAllister. If you're just now tuning in, he is newly appointed Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. To learn more about them, go to phcharters.org, at phcharters on social media, on Twitter more specifically. Lenny is at Lenny McAllister, joining us here on Reality Check. We're talking about the future of charter schools in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, also just the future of K through 12 education. I did want to discuss that with you a little bit, Lenny. K through 12 education, it's in a state of crisis overall. Obviously, charter schools are part of that equation. It's just not coming up as an issue, you know, particularly during this very tense, very caustic presidential campaign, this election cycle. Why isn't that? Why isn't it? You don't even hear it coming up in the debates, even though households are going through a real emergency crisis here. Students are literally lost, have been lost in the pandemic shuffle. So how do we, on one hand, lawmakers, legislators, parents, educators, everyone understands that it's important. But I tend to feel like in the public discourse, it's still taken for granted K through 12 education. How do we change that?
It's very unfortunate. You're right. I mean, we've heard more bickering from political sides and political parties than we have heard solutions. But I can tell you at the coalition, one of the things that we're doing, Charles, is starting in 2021, we're going to leverage this noteworthy and groundbreaking grant that we received, the CSP grant, which basically authorizes us over the course of 5 years to take $30 million total and replicate high-quality, high-performing charter schools and create more of them throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Provide more opportunities for these kids, not just in Philadelphia. Obviously, we'll be focusing on the southeastern part of the state, but across the Keystone State, to allow parents to see that, look, during this pandemic and during these tough economic times, we're trying to provide avenues so that your children can be prepared for the future. Now, with that said, I know that we still have to make sure that we have the lawmakers on board, and we're going to have to pivot their attention back to the kids and not on the money or not on the bickering. But what we can do as a coalition is do the best with this grant. We can highlight the positive stories, and we can replicate schools that work. And that's what we plan on doing starting in January for the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Before we got into pandemic mode, before there were the shutdowns, I think it was back in February, Governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, was proposing or was pushing for much more rigid accountability measures for charter schools. I mean, you were saying just a few moments ago, charter schools have to do more with less, and people do point that out, or critics of charter schools always point that out, that, okay, as they're doing more with less, as they're doing, they're setting up new creative paradigms and models, they're not being, and the administrators, the educators, the teachers in public charter schools are not being held as accountable as public school educators, administrators, teachers. He wanted to change the way district payments to charters are calculated, et cetera. How do you address that? How do you tackle that in your new role, having a better relationship with the governor? He's a Democrat. Obviously, having a better relationship with all Democrats, many of them skeptics of things like charter schools.
I think that, first of all, if you look at the polling, we can see that 3/4 of all Americans want expanded school choice. And in fact, at the beginning of the year, the Democratic primary voters voted 90%, particularly African Americans, that they wanted expanded school choice, including expanding public charter schools as well, which goes back to the grant. How do you replicate high-performing models so that people can get those needs met, to get kids off the waiting list and things along those lines? Now, of course, there's accountability built into the process. You can always tweak and look and see what needs to be done better, but people forget that local school boards authorize the charters. The Department of Education handles the appeals. There's a funding process in place that is designated and put in the law by lawmakers in Harrisburg. There's accountability already there. And I think that we have to look at supporting the charter schools so that the ones that are successful can continue to grow and don't have to have these rigid glass ceilings over their heads, such as string theory in Philadelphia, or an award-winning model there, Fieri, an award-winning model there, but they continue to have these glass ceilings put over their heads through bureaucracy. We have to make sure that we don't have that in place. I think that as we move forward, there are opportunities to show the governor and show lawmakers that education is not a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan, non-political issue if we tackle this the right way, that we can find funding and we can leverage each other. People forget, Charles, that the charter law was put into place so that the innovation of charter schools can be leveraged by traditional public schools to improve education from border to border throughout the Keystone State. That idea has been lost, and that's one of the things that, with me at the head of the coalition and working with my teammates within the coalition, that's going to be a focus I'm going to try to bring back to the gubernatorial mansion, regardless of who's governor, as well as to lawmakers in Harrisburg.
This is a good question from a listener who's watching us on WURD TV on Facebook.com/forward, Lenny. Well, what is the need for charter schools if they are public schools? What's the difference? It seems like a trivial question. It's very basic, but it raises an interesting point again. Once again, that tension between charters and public.
Now, I think it's a brilliant question, because a lot of people just simply don't understand, Charles, and I thank that listener and that viewer for that question. What charters are able to do, what charter schools are able to do, is they're allowed to have a little bit of flexibility in how they do everything from their curriculum to the length of their school days, to the amount of time that they're in school, the different types of programs they put into place in order to help the academic performances of kids that are seeking that option in school choice. And people forget that charter schools have been around for roughly 25 years. The Philadelphia School District has been around for over 150 years. So what we're trying to do with charter schools, and this is why the law came up in 1997, is we're trying to close stubborn gaps that have existed over decades within a pretty significantly smaller period of time. Thus, the innovation and the flexibility that charters have. Now, with that entrepreneurial perspective on things, there are times where you have very, very good models that work immediately. You have some that work over time, and you have some that need to be tweaked or completely abandoned. That's some of the frustration that people see with charter schools. But again, I think people fail to realize that charters have only been around in Pennsylvania for 23 years. And we've been dealing with the failures of education, particularly for black and brown children throughout the Commonwealth, for decades on end. We're making grounds, and we hope that we can leverage each other, traditional to charter, to ensure that our kids get the type of education and education equity that they deserve.
There seems to be, wouldn't you say, Lenny, this sort of cognitive dissonance that's there as far as, once again, it goes back to that tension over, school choice. There's a lot of tension in terms of the rhetoric and the language and the talking points, and obviously school choice is more of is viewed as more of a sort of Republican agenda thing versus Democrats. But then you have high numbers of majority numbers of black parents who support, if not choice, definitely the concept of charter schools. You have a growing number of black children, of black students, scholars who are transitioning into public charter schools. Where is that? So it's like when they talk about charter schools or the charter school that their child may be going to, black parents are definitely positive. That resonates with them. When you start talking about school choice, they start thinking more politically. So there's that disconnect. How do you tackle that?
I think number one, people fail to realize that school choice always exists. If you're a white family making $350,000 a year, your school choice is buying a house in a community where you don't have to pay for a private school. Your home is going to basically ensure that your kids have a good public school to go to, or your income allows you to be able to send them to the private school of your choice. Yeah. The only people that don't have school choice are poor people, and disproportionately those are black people and brown people in America. So when you start looking at school choice, you have to understand that school choice impacts those that need it the most. Now, subsequent to that, I think people oftentimes get caught up with school choice with vouchers, and they believe that they're basically giving free money to people that don't deserve that. But again, if you go back to the whole premise of what school choice needs to be, it's school choice for all, not the continued process of what we have right now, which is school choice for those that are making above a certain income. Now, school choice, as I've said previously, it doesn't have to just be vouchers. I think that here in Pennsylvania, particularly in the eastern part of the state, school choice means public charter schools, which is different than in the West. But here in Philadelphia, in Allentown, where I'm sitting right now, at Executive Action Academy Charter School up here in Allentown, the schools up here in this part of the state understand that school choice means public charter schools. They mean working with innovation. They mean advancing the needle and moving forward from there. And I think that one of the things I can do is be that bridge between how people may misperceive what school choice is and what school choice really is, particularly from an African American and a Latino perspective, because I think that's extremely important. As we move through the pandemic, we all heal from the racial and cultural divides we're going through right now in this year, and then move forward so our kids can get the best they can get.
All right, we've been talking with Lenny McAllister, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. What's your first move, Lenny, with this new appointment? What's the first big initiative that you're going to be rolling out, maybe within your, you ask elected officials what they're going to be doing in their first 100 days. What's that look like for you, Lenny?
I think the first thing that I need to look at is how we're going to best implement this grant, making sure that this grant, it's a very unique, groundbreaking opportunity, and we need to ensure that we have good processes in place to replicate the very best schools in Pennsylvania so that more kids get a high-quality education across this Commonwealth. I think if there's anything that's more paramount to that, I don't know what it is. Now, I am doing a media tour. I am meeting and greeting where I can, social distancing and the like. We did that in front of Free Area down on Chestnut Street earlier today, and socially distanced and things along those lines. But if there's a tangible thing from an executive standpoint, it's making sure that we're ready to go with this grant starting in January of 2021 to ensure that we can bring more quality schools to more kids across the Commonwealth.
All right, go to pacharters.org for more information on the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. We've been talking with its newly minted executive director, Lenny McAllister. Go to @Lenny McAllister or LennyMcAllister.com, obviously, for more information on him, but pacharters.org to find out what they are up to. Lenny, really appreciate your time. Good luck to you. I'm sure we'll be talking with you again about this.
Thank you, kind sir. God bless you all. Take care now.
All right, do the same. Good luck. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back on the other side of that break, I think we're supposed to be talking with Stefan Hankin. Stefan Hankin is one of our resident contributors here at Reality Check WURD. So we're having a strategist segment coming up next with Stefan Hankin here on WURD. It's Reality Check Tuesday, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's easier than ever to get the right health coverage for families of all sizes.
This is Bonnie, Ronnie, Tani, Johnny.
Penny gets you covered. Millennials, gig workers, virtual birthday partiers.
Grandma, you're on mute.
Penny gets you all covered. Penny helps you compare plans, get financial assistance, and purchase health insurance that fits your life. Get covered at PENNIE.com or call 1-844-844-8040.
WURD Radio presents the following wellness tip to support our listeners with mindfulness and motivation as we continue to navigate the pandemic together.
Hi, this is Halana, your resident health and wellness coach with tips to help you stay well. Let's talk about eating mindfully. Often we are rushing from moment to moment and we hurry through our eating like it's checking off an item on our to-do list. Each day for each meal, let's commit to doing these 3 simple things to activate our mindful eating experience. Number 1, slow down. Number 2, eat while you're sitting down. And number 3, chew each bite 20 to 30 times. You can do it. Eating mindfully is something we can all do to support our overall health and digestion. Go ahead and try it for your next meal today. Stay well with WURD. Happy living.
Stay well with WURD. Connect with us at WURDradio.com.
New Voices for Reproductive Justice is registering Black women and their families in Philly to vote. The general election is on November 3rd. You can register to vote online at rock.vote/New Voices. That's rock.vote/New Voices. The deadline to register is October 19th. If you need assistance registering to vote, visit newvoicesrj.org.
Livelihood. The new initiative from WURD Radio, connecting Philadelphians to jobs, entrepreneurship opportunities, small business resources, and financial literacy. Visit WURDworks.com right now and take the next step in your professional journey.
Work, 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 work. To me, I be work,
Livelihood
work, work,
is supported by the Nightland Fest's Local News Transformation Fund, Borealis Philanthropies Racial Equity and Journalism Fund, and the Solutions Journalism Network.
What's up, everyone? I know you know the word, no, not the station, but this word, J-O-B that is, and our friends at Amoroso's Baking Company are hiring right now. Amoroso's has been baking the delicious bread in our community for over 100 years, and they want you to join their team today. The old and the young love Amoroso's, and they are hiring right now. Check it out. They offer fair pay and provide health, dental, and prescription plans after 90 days employment. Call 856-754-0355 or visit amorososbaking.com for details.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app, WURD TV, WURD app, and WURDradio.com for listening beyond Greater Philly and the Delaware Valley, listening throughout the nation and the world. So definitely. Many of you out there can listen into WURD wherever you go. You don't have to just be in Philly. You can be, and many of you do. We appreciate that. Lots of comments, lots of thoughts. Appreciate that as always. At the WURD TV, at the Facebook live stream on WURD TV on facebook.com/WURD. You can also reach us. You can also watch us at a little bit more easily if you don't have Facebook, youtube.com/onWURD, youtube.com/onWURD. We don't pay enough attention to that. I wonder if there's ever comments over there, but WURD TV, I need to go over there from time to time. WURD TV is live at youtube.com/onWURD as well. A little bit easier to interface with than the Facebook live stream. If you don't have Facebook, you can go to youtube.com/onWURD. But you can watch it as well for facebook.com/forward. It's easily accessible. It's open. You don't have to have a Facebook account to watch us on WURD TV on Facebook. But to leave comments, you'll need that Facebook account, of course. Facebook.com/forward for that. Joining us now is Stefan Hankin. He is founder, principal CEO of Lincoln Park Strategies. Go to lpstrategies.com for more information. Also founder, CEO of Trendency Research. Get a lot of great insights at Trendency Research. We talk about that every now and then here on Reality Check. He's been keeping us updated on how things have been evolving in the polls in the presidential race. Go to Trendency. I love that name, Trendency.com for more information. Stefan joins us by phone here for our weekly strategist segment. Stefan, how are you doing, sir?
Not too bad. How you doing?
All right, good, good. Always good to talk with you, man. So how are things shaping up so far? We're less than 2 weeks out. People are obviously anxious, excited, nervous about how things are turning out. We looked at your Trendency Research update on the 2020 election that came out last week, your most recent update. Biden has a lead. So your Trendency voter average allocation has Vice President Biden with a 14.5-point lead. So that seems comfortable. People would think, oh, okay, Biden's got this. But I don't know. You put some caution on that, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, so with averages, you always want to be a little careful, right? Because you can sort of lose some stuff inside the numbers. And I mean, in general, there's all the data out there, whether it's ours, other folks, like everything is pointing to much better for Biden than it is for Trump, right? And like The Economist has Biden and Harris a chance of winning at, just right around like 90%, right? But, that means 10% chance of Trump winning, and, which is pretty much the situation we were in 2016. And, the example we use is like, look, if you're on vacation and it says it's a 10% chance of rain, you're probably still going to go to the beach, but like,
right.
It might rain, right? So this feels like a good beach day, but it might still rain. Like, we have to be like prepared for that possibility. But all the measurements are pretty much, pointing towards, better news for Biden than certainly it is for Trump. We're seeing more voters being open to the idea of voting for Biden than for Trump. Trump's sort of like his ability to reach into voters has actually shrunk over time. Biden has expanded it. All of these things are good, but the fact that there's still a chance for Trump to win, I think probably tells us all we really need to know about our country right now, and it's a sad state of affairs. I mean, obviously my opinion here, but I would like to think that the way he's handled his job and the way he talks about, a majority of Americans would put him at a 0% chance of winning, but that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it, are we more concerned about still like a quiet segment of the electorate, of the overall American electorate out there quietly stumping for, burning for Trump, right? Is it more of that, or is it more like, hey, because I see some concerns out there about voter suppression. That's something that we still haven't factored in. Like the pollsters, the polling doesn't have that like average percentage of voter suppression impact. Like, I think the big question is how much do Republicans cheat? Because it's not how much are they going to win by, it's how much do they cheat by.
Exactly. And it's nearly impossible to factor that into polling, right? Because it's sort of like we don't know what the extent of fraud could be. The way we're looking at it is like, look, any state where Biden has a solid lead, so we're sort of like in our book, that's like 6 or more points. That feels comfortable. And then if it's below that, and certainly if it's down in the 1-2 point range, that's where fraud can absolutely have an outcome. right? And then, in Pennsylvania, we've heard stories about the number of ballots already getting rejected. Obviously, the Republicans tried to block any ballot received in the mail after Election Day as invalid. The Supreme Court thankfully stepped in on that, but somehow it's only 3 days after it can be received. I mean, we afford our military overseas the ability to vote as long as it is postmarked by Election Day, that vote is to be counted. How we're not saying that for every American citizen is just kind of beyond my comprehension. But,
right.
And then the other piece that we're concerned about, although since other movement is happening, it's slightly less of a concern, but I still think we shouldn't brush over this, is what is happening among Black voters and specifically among Black men.
Right.
Not that we're seeing Black men voting for Trump, like a majority voting for Trump, but in our numbers we're seeing it at around 20%. Maybe a little bit lower than that, and that's a really high number given the group that we're talking about here. And our view is that there's been a concerted effort to tarnish Biden's name, mostly through the mental block here, the crime bill from back in the 80s, 90s, and and then we're sort of it's one of these we can't quite prove it because Facebook isn't exactly forthcoming on who's buying what and saying what, but all the data points to something like this going on, and we're feeling pretty confident that this is in fact happening. And we kind of see that among we asked our panelists on Trendency, are you voting for Trump? If you're supporting Trump, are you voting for Trump or are you voting against Biden? And, white voters, it's 88% say they're voting for Trump and 12% are voting against Biden. Among Black voters and Black men specifically, it's a 75-25 split. So it's more than double of Black male Trump supporters are saying that they're voting against Biden compared to their white counterparts, which is not normal, right? Those differences shouldn't really be there, especially given the dynamics that we're looking at here. And so there's definitely something going on there now.
So double. Yeah. So wow, that's interesting. I don't know if people caught that. Double the amount of Black men, of at least Black men that you've surveyed through Trendency, potential Black male voters. Double the amount of Black male voters are saying they'll vote for Trump or will support Trump. Versus their white male counterparts, or versus just white voters in general?
They're my white male counterpart, right? So they're decidedly more anti-Biden than white voters are, right? And there's not there's not a lot of history there to really say that that's not that it's not real, but there's nothing to really say this makes logical sense because Biden's been out there with terrible policies and stuff like that. But again, and we've seen pieces of this this crime bill, this anti-Biden
and real quick before you go on, Stefan, what's the number for? So it was 75% Black men Biden, 25% Black men Trump. What's the number for white men? Just out of curiosity.
It's 88-12.
88-12. Wow.
Yeah. So so there's definitely something going on there. Again, overall, Black men are going to be voting for Biden in in big numbers, right? But it's that the fact that if we're seeing among Black women the support for Trump is low single digits, and among Black men it's getting closer to 20%, right? There's something going on there. And in a state like Pennsylvania, states like Michigan, Ohio, if overall Black support is down a couple points, that makes the state more competitive for Trump.
Yeah, that's so. Because one thing I noticed with the Trendency is talking about that Black milk is that is a problem, and it still persists as a blind spot for Biden, that 94 crime bill. I mean, I can, and you saw me, I was on Twitter. I was more than happy to spar with some folks about the 94 crime bill because it's a meme. Yep. People are throwing the phrase out there, 94 crime bill, 94 crime. Fam, you ain't read it.
Right.
I'm not endorsing the crime. I'm not saying the crime bill was a good thing, but there was bad and ugly to it, but there was good in it as well. There was good, bad, and ugly. It's like if you're going to have a conversation about the '94 crime bill, then be complete about it. Be holistic. Be honest about it. Don't just like throw the meme out there because your boys, you were just hanging out one day and they were like, man, that '94 crime bill that Biden wrote, which he didn't write. It was a bunch of other people wrote it with him. He was Senate Judiciary Committee chair. Was his responsibility at the time. And everybody wanted to get something like a crime bill passed. Bernie Sanders voted for that same crime bill, as did the majority of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time. That's what people were asking for. If they knew back then what we know now, of course people wouldn't have voted for the crime bill. But people were desperate. It was really bad back then. And I was working on the Hill, staffing on the Hill at the time that they passed the crime bill, '94 crime bill. So it's just that I think that that's really important there. The Biden campaign, every time I ask them this or I talk to them about it, either on record or off record, they still don't have a response for it. Like they still are not really prepared for. I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, so what? If I'm going to pick a weakness for Biden, or there are a couple out there, but I think one of the big ones is he does not seem to like to ever say that he was wrong or made a mistake, right? And to your kind of point, right? Like, I think just coming out and being like, look, at the time, this was the thinking. We had the support of the Congressional Black Caucus. We had the support of, just about every Democratic senator. Obviously, Republicans were on board too. Like, this was the mode of thinking at the time. In hindsight, terrible idea. And if I had the knowledge then that I have now, I never would have supported it. But at the time, this made sense. And, if I could go back and do it again, I absolutely would. Like, then it just goes away, right? Like, and that does not, I don't understand the inability to be retrospective in your votes. I mean, if you look at, I was watching Pete Souza's documentary thing on MSNBC the other day about the Obama, and through my tears of simpler times and good times, but I was, they showed his interview where he was talking about gay marriage, and that was just, look, I've evolved on this, right? And this is obviously a different kind of issue, but just the ability to look backwards and say, yeah, that was a mistake. If I knew then what I know now, it's a mistake. Does not seem like it's a tough answer.
Yeah, I think and that's a real problem for him. And I think this black voter conversation is real important, because when I looked at 2016 or the 2016 exit polling, Stefan, overall, just 8% of black voters voted for Trump.
Yeah,
we're talking about, in your tendency research, you're showing 19% of black voters or potential black voters saying that they're going to vote for Trump. That's a problem. That's double. That's like more than double the amount of black voters that actually came out for Trump in 2016. I mean, how are Democrats going to win? I guess they're going to need white voters, especially white suburban women, to make up for that loss, if that loss actually takes place.
Exactly. Yeah. No. 100%. And I'll think. Thankfully for Democrats, it's happening that way. And the other thing, and this is more for Trump than down ticket stuff, but seniors are going decidedly more towards Biden. And clearly, I mean, this is all because of COVID and Trump's response to COVID. But so we're making up for the fact that this is happening. And and again, we don't have definitive proof on this because we're never going to be able to get this data. But if I'm guessing, I'm saying this isn't a Trump campaign thing. This is a, friends of Trump, whether they're based in this country or not.
Right.
This has been a long-term, over the last 8 to 10 months, once it became clear that Biden was going to be the nominee, of just going after black voters and especially black men to try to soften their support. Right, and maybe even if they're lucky, kind of go as far as to vote for Trump, and and then people pick stuff up, and that's Kanye just start quote unquote running for president. Is not sort of a standalone thing, right? It was all part and parcel of this effort.
Yeah. There's a listener on WURD TV, Junior Lee, making some interesting points here. Junior Lee saying, Stefan, Biden is in a position where he cannot defend nor reject that crime bill, and therefore he looks more skeptical to black men because they are convinced it has destroyed their lives. Maybe Biden doesn't really regret the crime bill because for the issues that it was drafted for. will he say that it worked? So that's Junior Lee. It's some good points. I think the response is there, just like I always said during the Democratic primary for Kamala Harris when she was running for president. There's a response, like for you being a prosecutor. Like, just say it. Like, there's the elevator pitch is there. Like, you can say it in 30 seconds. Hey, I'm going to stand by. This is the hill I'm going to die on. Yeah, I was a prosecutor at the time, and this is what I did. And she just seemed a little bit sloppy about that. Same thing with this crime bill thing. I think the same thing too, to a degree. Your last thought on this, Stefan, on fracking. I think the answer, there's a nice solid response there with fracking. That question keeps coming up every time they go into Pennsylvania, and it keeps coming up in those town halls. Are you against fracking or not? And I think that he can, like, that's the moment where he can say, hey, you know what? We need to transition out of it. I'm not going to just pull the plug on it the day I become president, but what's wrong with banning fracking eventually? Because you're going to get more, if we transfer the jobs in fracking over to clean energy, you make more jobs with clean energy than you do with this old school fossil fuel economy, right?
Right. Yeah, and again, like, why there isn't sort of like a crystal clear answer on this, but I think again, the voters that you even have a shot of getting at, if you're just like, look, the day I walk in office, I'm not turning off the switch so that fracking just stops, right? Like, anything that is set up and going is going to continue to go for, probably as long as you're going to have jobs. But, we're not going to approve new drilling sites. We're moving to here, and here's my plan for Pennsylvania of how they're going to capture, most, if not, all of those jobs. And then you say the same thing in Ohio, and you say, but yeah, like, it's like, look, this is what my plan is, right? Like, and you who has the job at the whatever you would call it, fracking location, you're still going to have a job, because this isn't going away, anytime in the next probably 5-10 years or something like that, however long the gas is there. But yeah, this is not our focus for the future, right? Our focus is on wind, solar, and
right,
other renewables, and that's where the future is. Look at what every car company is doing. Like, look at what every major industry is doing. Like, they're moving away from this stuff. Why is the government looking backwards?
Right. No, that's true. And I think that hey, folks in the fossil fuel, natural gas, fracking industry, your jobs can easily be transferred over to clean energy. That's the future. Like, let's do it. So full stop. Like, that's it. Like, there's actually more. And those who don't have jobs in this old school fossil fuel economy, guess what? You can definitely get jobs in the clean energy, green economy. So it's just like a win-win. And I don't understand, like, the clumsiness around, like, those two, 94 crime bill and fracking. It's just the clumsiness in that messaging department. It baffles my mind. I'm sure it baffles yours too, Stefan. That's why we bring you on here to talk about it. Stefan Hankin, Lincoln Park Strategies. Go to lpstrategies.com or at lpstrategies. Gives great insights on social media too. He's highly engaged there on twitter.com at lpstrategies and trendency.com. Check out trendency.com. And we put that out on our companion magazine from time to time at thebnote.com as well. Stefan, thanks for this conversation. Really appreciate it. Those numbers are really, the black men, white men numbers are just stunning. But it's stuff people need to know. But thank you for that.
Absolutely. Great to be on.
All right. Thanks again. We'll be talking to you, I'm sure. Take care. Be safe out there. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, phone lines are open, 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
The time is now to put an end to the chronic incompetence of Donald Trump and his League of Liars. Donald Trump makes a mockery of the institution of the presidency. He's polarized our country, and his dangerous policies must not continue. Joe Biden has the character, empathy, and experience to lead us through these challenging times. He helped lead the nation out of the 2008 financial crisis into the longest period of economic growth in our history, and he can do it again. As president, he will heal divisions and unite us around the shared values of justice. He'll create opportunities for quality education and good-paying jobs, and he'll build on the Affordable Care Act, not tear it down. While Donald Trump thinks coronavirus and climate change are a hoax, Joe Biden already has a coronavirus recovery plan and a strategy to create more jobs while also tackling the climate crisis. Vote for a president who will stand on the right side of history. Vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Paid for by Black PAC and Priorities USA Action. BlackPAC.com and PrioritiesUSAAction.org, which are responsible for the content of this advertising. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. But let's be clear. This election is about building this country back better. And that's exactly what Joe and I will do. Bring back critical supply chains so the future is made in America. Build on the Affordable Care Act. And finally, offer caregivers the dignity, the respect, and the pay they deserve. We'll protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. Root out systemic racism in our justice system. And pass a new Voting Rights Act that will ensure every voice is heard and every voice is counted. We have a chance to choose a better future for our country.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Your success doesn't have to wait. It's time for a new year and a new you. And with Community College of Philadelphia, your goals are within reach. Our programs are a direct line to today's most sought-after careers, and you can skip the debt without sacrificing the quality of your education. Choose Community College of Philadelphia this spring semester, and you're choosing an education that you will value for years to come. Classes will be offered online, and all admissions and student support services are available remotely. Don't pay more at another college to earn the same credits from home. Start your success story with Community College of Philadelphia. Join us for a virtual open house on Thursday, November 5th at 6 p.m. To get started, RSVP at ccp.edu/open house. Your success starts at ccp.edu.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
I mean, that's those numbers right there. Like those are concerning. Those numbers that Stefan Hankin, that you don't get that anywhere else. That's shared exclusively. Stefan shares his data when it comes to media outlets. Stefan, who's based in Washington D.C., he first announces or shares his polling data with Reality Check on WURD. Like the first major national black voter poll in 2020 from a black media outlet was Stefan Hankin, Lincoln Park Strategies, partnering up with WURD, and we saw concerning numbers back then, and that was like at the leg end of the Democratic presidential primary. It was before the pandemic started. So you're getting those numbers here first on WURD, more specifically on Reality Check. Like I'm about to pass that on to some folks I know over there who they may be aware of those numbers too. They might be. Stefan also, he's worked very heavily with the Obama campaign. He works very heavily with Democrats, of course. And so they might be aware of those numbers. There might be some folks in that space who are not. But that's really concerning. So like, you have a lot of, like I was just having a kind of quiet check-in with my friends over at the Congressional Black Caucus. And those past few weeks, Congressional Black Caucus members have been like at the last minute canceling out from their weekly interviews here on Reality Check WURD. And I understand that because it's getting real busy and real hectic, and they got to be out there on the campaign trail. But listen, Philly is that like critical battleground like you don't want to miss. And you have to be on, and we were and the person over there who's working CBC Communications totally agreed with me and was like, I'm trying to tell those black congressional members, like, you have got to be interacting with outlets like WURD. You have got to be talking to them. You can't be passing through Philadelphia or expecting to get black votes out of Philly. WURD is the black super voter station. It's Black Philly Super Voter Central. And, you can't be expecting to get their votes and then you just pass through Philly and you don't talk when you're like President Obama passing through Philly. We don't hear President Obama yet on WURD. It's like, and it's not, Philly's not the only place or the only spot. It's like, just political leaders constantly either taking black media for granted, taking the spaces that you the listeners, trust the most and rely on the most, either taking them for granted or completely ignoring them. But when they get those calls from those other like white owned outlets, or let CNN or MSNBC or even Fox call them, oh, they make sure they on those outlets. They make sure they're quick to they're quick to jump on those outlets. But the black folks who do vote listen to outlets and trust and rely on outlets like WURD. And black political leaders in Philly understand that, and they know that. I hope that they're telegraphing that to folks at the Biden campaign and folks at other institutions like the Congressional Black Caucus and elsewhere. Because it doesn't sound like they're telegraphing that. This is not 2016. I mean, how many times do people like me have to tell folks out there like them that this is not 2016? It's still folks out there acting like this is 2016, still working off a 2016 playbook. And here we have like less than 2 weeks to go. I don't get it. Let me go to Maurice out of Southwest, who's calling in for a reality check. Maurice?
Hey, Charles, isn't every state rep up for election this year?
Yes, they are. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday.
Why haven't they been on URD? I know when we do primaries, the election is just about done. But it would be nice for us to hear from our state reps telling us to get out there and vote and how important it is. But right now, especially here in Philadelphia, they already know they got the seat, so they don't have to say anything.
Right. Some, I will explain it to. Yeah, there's a little technical.
People, we're not our job to win the state. See, the most important thing about this election is not hearing from other people from outside the state. It's for us that's inside the state to try to deliver the state for Biden and Harris.
Right.
Everybody needs this state right now. Republicans and Democrats need this state, but we need to do more to hand this state from, because instead of that, I mean, you doing your job. I can't tell you how to do your job. I could never tell you how to do your job. But and my reasoning is that we need to start hearing from people, black people, not white people, black people upstate Pennsylvania, about what's going on in their area, on how they're concerned on getting their vote out. And I'm not hearing that. I want to hear it on URD. I know you say you say it on somewhere else, but I want to hear somebody from Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Lordstown, Pottstown, or Cokesville. I want to hear the black people in those areas telling me how they're out getting out to vote. You see what I'm saying? And we don't hear that. I think that URD, and I've been listening since the beginning of the station, I think URD needs to get off his high horse and go out there and start reaching out to these communities instead of expecting these communities to reach in. Because I think this state would be the biggest.
I would say that I think you're right, Maurice. I think you're right. I do think overall you're right in terms of like we should connect more with the state. I don't think WRD's on a high horse. I don't think WRD's ever been on a high horse. I think WRD's been more than like capable and able and aggressive and trying to make sure that it's connecting as much as possible with the community. Are we perfect at that? No, no one's perfect at it. And could we do more? Yes. So I would just kind of like, I totally agree with the overall point you're trying to make. I just would probably disagree with you on that small point. I think there's a technical issue there though. There's this whole equal time thing. That's why you're hearing these Trump ads. Like, we got to have like at this time, you can't overdo too much of one side, when they're up for re-election due to FCC, Federal Communications Commission rules, or, people will, if suddenly you hear a whole bunch of Democrats who are even state legislators on during election time when they're all up for re-election, that creates a problem. That creates a real legal and policy or a regulatory problem for WURD. So I think that's one of the reasons why you're not hearing state legislators as much as you'd like to. To your point, however, and I do agree, Democrats, particularly state legislative Democrats, have got to do a better job. You guys are sucking at it right now. Like the state legislative, the Philly state legislative delegation is sucking at telling people that Harrisburg is up for grabs this year. Y'all are just, I know a few of y'all listening, y'all just suck at it right now because people don't even know that there's down ballot state races taking place. Maurice is spot on with that assessment. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Both the Pennsylvania State House and but y'all are going to, but next year, if Republicans are still in control of Harrisburg, y'all are going to be whining and complaining about how you're trying to get stuff passed. And oh, Republicans are still in control of Harrisburg. And you know what? I'm not going to feel so sorry for y'all when that happens, because I'm like, well, where was the noise that y'all needed to make to let people know that there's big state legislative races happening in Pennsylvania, that Harrisburg was up for grabs? You're just not doing, across the state, y'all are not doing a good job at that. And you need to work on it now. You need to get on it now. So I agree with Maurice on that point. Maurice, I gotta let you go. Let me go to Gary out of Southwest, who's calling in for a reality check. Gary? Gary, can you hear us? Gary out of Southwest. I don't think Gary going once, going twice. Let me go to Woody at the barbershop, calling in for a reality check. Woody? Having some phone issues here. Woody at the barbershop, calling for a reality check. Jordan, do we have, I saw some calls, but not sure if people are hearing us. All right. Woody going once, going twice, going, okay, let's do this. Let's go to break. And then when we come back, maybe we'll take a call, and then we'll go on to our next guest, Christina Stacey Urban, who's coming up next. But maybe I'll take one call. Might be having just a phone issue right there. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll return on Reality Check Tuesday here on WURD.
If you're thinking of voting by mail this election, remember that it's safe, it's secure, and it counts. But there are a few things to keep in mind. While the application deadline is October 27th, you should apply now and send your ballot back as early as possible, before November 3rd. When it comes to sending it back, you can drop it in the mail, use a designated drop box, or return it to a satellite election office. To find one or for more information, visit PhiladelphiaVotes.com.
Hi, my name is Dr. Blake. If you're out there with residual baby fat and you want that waistline back, Smart Lipo Laser is for you at Blake GI Med Spa Services. It is affordable, minimally invasive, minimum discomfort, minimum downtime, and no loose skin. You will see results in 24 hours. Give us a call at Blake GI Med Spa Services today, 215-849-4902.
Listen to Laborers Live.
We created the weekend. We created the 40-hour work week. We just want enough to feed our family, be able to send our children to college, and let our next generation do better than we did.
To people that might have forgot how important unionism is in a country like the United States. People now infringing on our 8-hour workday, trying to work people more than 8 hours without overtime, trying to work people without benefits. In the long run, everybody's getting a fat paycheck except the worker. So this is really a wake-up call for America.
The struggle is continuous. Tune in to Laborers Live every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. Sponsored by LESIT, the Laborers Employers Cooperation Education Trust of the Laborers District Council of Philadelphia and vicinity.
Local 332, Sam Staten Jr. Business Manager. Local 57, Esteban Vera Business Manager. Local 135, Dan Woodall Jr. Business Manager. Local 413, James Harper Jr. Business Manager. The Laborers District Council, Ryan Boyer Business Manager, and Tony Staten, Executive Director of LESIT.
Home of the Happy Hour. With Sincerely Sarita. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Streaming live at WURDRadio.com and on the WURD Radio app. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDRadio.com.
All right, welcome back to Reality Check 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDRadio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Of course, beyond the beyond Philly proper, Greater Philly, and the Delaware Valley, we are WURDRadio.com for our live stream, healthy, robust live stream. At that, you can listen to us throughout the country and throughout the world at WURDRadio.com. Also, WURD TV live stream at Facebook.com/4WURD and YouTube.com/onWURD. And your WURD app downloadable on your smartphone or tablet device. Just download that on your Google Play or Apple Store today when you get a chance. Great app, and you can take it, wonderful app, and you can take it wherever you go. We're waiting on our next guest. I don't know if she's there yet. Oh, yes, she is. Christina Stacey with the Urban Institute. is joining us here on Reality Check. We do have her. I was just noticing, I was just seeing if we had any callers from like the previous. I think we had like a phone glitch before we went to break, but we'll get you guys back. We're going to have open phones very shortly here on Reality Check. But in the meantime, let's talk with Christina Stacy, who is a senior fellow at the Urban Institute. Go to urban.org for more information. She joins us here on Reality Check. Christina, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
All right, good, good. Thanks for joining us. Also, you had recently put together an analysis with your other colleagues at the Urban Institute about cities that are diverse and inclusive and cities that are not. And so very useful exercise, very useful study. Talk about that. Just give us a general overview real quick, or a general explanation of the study. What prompted it? What general trends were you looking at?
Sure, yeah. So we started doing this research kind of thinking about Detroit, and as Detroit was recovering from their bankruptcy and, you know, hearing stories out of Detroit of a recovery happening, but it being potentially kind of centered in some neighborhoods and not being spread throughout to all residents. So we wanted to learn from other cities about ways in which a place like Detroit could recover from economic distress in a way that helps and benefits all residents rather than just a select few. So we wanted to create like a handbook of policies from cities, but we learned really quickly that we weren't sure which cities had inclusively recovered from distress, and we wanted to be able to measure that and track it before telling cities, you know, promoting policies or programs without being sure that they really led to greater, what we're calling inclusion.
Yeah, and so, and once again, you can go to urban.org and you can see this. This study came out last month in September. Which cities became more and less racially and economically inclusive over the past few years? It's a great study, great kind of charts to complement it, you know, so people can understand. What were the noticeable differences between those cities? First, you know, kind of give us like your top, you know, 5 or 10, if you will, or top few cities that are the most like economically, racially diverse and inclusive, and those that are, you know, kind of their counterparts that are less so. And what are kind of those key differences or major differences between those cities?
Sure. Well, I don't have the top 10, bottom 10 levels in front of me right now, but in terms of changes over the past couple of years, we saw improvements in places like Duluth, Minnesota, Waterbury, Connecticut, Aurora, Illinois, some places you might not think of. And then we saw kind of reductions in inclusion in cities like Hialeah, Florida, Canton, Ohio, Trenton, New Jersey, Albany, New York. So, I mean, every place is different, and, you know, some cities were improving on things like racial poverty gaps, while others were worsening on, you know, racial education gaps and things like that. But kind of, you know, trying to draw bigger trends to learn from the cities that have improved and then to learn from the ones that worsened. You know, we saw that in the places that did improve on inclusion, they really often, not always, because sometimes it's just external economic forces that help. They had leaders who really fought for equity and made intentional policies that made equity and inclusion a part of all decision making, and didn't think of equity and inclusion as an alternative to growth, but as integral to it. So, you know, we think we've learned from this that, you know, cities can improve on inclusion while they recover from economic distress, which I think is really important now as we're recovering, as we think about recovering in the future from COVID, that you can and must be intentional about making sure that the recovery is inclusive. And it's actually a great time to do so as you are rethinking strategies and growth. So we found a lot of cities that were able to improve on inclusion while they recovered from economic distress.
You know, it's interesting that you say that too, Christina. You know, your comment there kind of reminds me of like this recent, you may have seen it, I'm sure you saw it, this report, I think it was from Citibank, that came out about a couple of weeks ago that was announced, and they were saying that the economy, the overall U.S. economy, about $16 trillion of GDP, of gross domestic product, lost nationally over 10 years because of discrimination. And that if we just eliminate and wipe out all the discrimination, all the anti-blackness, right, we would actually gain, the economy would gain $5 trillion in GDP over 5 years, like $1 trillion a year, just in pure economic growth. And so actually it's like what you're showing here is that, hey, inclusion, diversity, that actually helps you recover. Like that's a key tool for the recovery. Like, okay, you may not like it personally, maybe, that's fine. That's your business, at the kitchen table or in the living room, you may not like certain types of people, but in terms of how you conduct business as a city, as a local government, this is a tool you want to use if you're trying to recover, or even if you're not trying to recover, you're just trying to grow your economy.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's so many great examples of that. I mean, we heard over and over about the benefits of creating a welcoming environment for immigrants, which can stem population decline in cities. It can help revitalize distressed neighborhoods and support innovation. We heard a great example of this out of Lowell, Massachusetts. They had a large influx of Cambodian refugees beginning in the 1980s, and the city literally celebrated them. They created a bunch of policies and programs to help support that community, and then they created a Southeast Asian Water Festival, which helps with inclusion of that community, but it also brings in tens of thousands of tourists a year and helps the economy. So literally celebrating diversity can be great. And I think it's also important thinking down to the neighborhood level. I have colleagues that have done research on the cost of segregation in Chicago, showing similar things, that if we got rid of racial and economic segregation at the neighborhood level, then our whole economy would flourish more. And a great example of that is, we've heard from employers in gentrifying neighborhoods of, things like coffee shops or restaurants, that they can't find enough employees willing to work there because they can't live within a decent commuting distance of their business. So being inclusive at all levels really helps the economy as a whole. So it's not an either or. They really need to go hand in hand.
Yeah, they really do need to go hand in hand. I think that's where you start that business case. You state that business case like, hey, this is how this is why we're trying to get you more towards, it's not just a sort of altruistic or moral argument, even though it should be, and it is for someone like me and you, but this is also about okay, there's a big value add here. You're missing out on all these dollars in this economic growth. One thing I did notice when I look at the list, Christina, of the cities that became more inclusive over a few years and the cities that were less inclusive, the list of the top cities that were less inclusive, Hialeah, I think Hialeah, Florida, I think I'm pronouncing that correct, or Canton, Ohio, and other places, a higher number of those less inclusive cities were in the South, whereas one city on that more inclusive list was in the South, Charleston, South Carolina. The other cities were in the Northeast or the West. Talk about that, those regional differences. It just seems like there's less and some people may automatically look at that and may just assume that, well, you know what, yeah, but it's the South. And so they still have those legacy problems there.
Yeah, I think there are certainly some, decades of historic policies that are still in effect today in many southern cities and states. The state level often has policies and restrictions on what cities can do to be inclusive. I don't think it's as simple as, the South is worse and the North or the West or the West is better, certainly. In fact, Louisville, Kentucky was one of the cities we found to have inclusively recovered from distress. And we heard great stories out of that city. But it was very intentional. Again, they, for instance, when they consolidated their city-county in 2003, they hired a separate entity, the University of Kentucky, to redraw their council district lines to create majority African-American districts. So now the racial makeup of the representatives in the merged government more closely approximates Louisville's racial makeup. Of course, Louisville still has a long way to go on inclusion and equity, but we did see some improvements during that time period. So I think you're right. There are a lot of racist institutions that and historical legacies from redlining and so many other policies that have been intentionally racist that many places are trying to, upend and turn over. And I think that during a recovery period, while it may seem like the hardest time to do so, in some ways it's the best time because you're already dismantling a bunch of institutions. So might as well redo them in a way then that is inclusive and equitable for all.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about, if you will, too, because you kind of hinted at it earlier on when you were given an example for one of the cities. I'm failing to recall from just a few minutes ago because it's just a fascinating conversation, but where they were complaining about how they wanted to hire more employees for coffee shops, couldn't because of transportation issues. Talk about how transportation factors into this study or this analysis. Like, transportation is key. I think people tend to take that for granted. That's going to be more important as we're trying to get into, like, at some point in the future. It's not going to happen now, but it's going to happen at some point in the future. We're going to get over this hump. We're going to be in post-pandemic. Transportation, that's just so key. Like, just making, I mean, if people still live far away from a job, okay, well, how easy do we make it for them to transport themselves, to commute to their job? And so just talk about how critical transportation is.
Oh gosh, it's absolutely critical. And we actually just released a separate study on transportation equity that your listeners can find on the urban.org website as well. So we've been looking at this in depth as well. And I mean, the pandemic, that's another area where the pandemic is just making things harder because transit agencies have lost a lot of funding through this. The CARES Act helps a bit, but I think there's going to be long-term budget and service cuts that a lot of places are going to have to undergo in order to stay afloat post-COVID. But transportation and also housing and land use are so important through all of this. There's all of so it's about access to opportunity and high opportunity neighborhoods, right? So you can either get there through housing policy and land use policy that makes sure that low-wage workers and people of color and other historically excluded populations are able to live in neighborhoods that have really high access opportunity, or you at least have to have good transit or transportation more broadly that allows them to get there quickly. So absolutely transportation, transit, all forms of transportation, having safe streets to walk down, to even get to your transit stop. All of those things are so important. But I would also undergird that, housing and land use are really key to even making transit functional. So we need to address all of these issues together. We need to make sure that our cities are set up in such a way that low-income people and other people who haven't been historically included in economic growth are able to benefit from it by living at least close enough to jobs and opportunity that transit can help connect up to it.
The city budgets, municipal budgets, are obviously going to be like much slimmer in the pandemic environment, and so we're just trying to figure out how they are going to adapt or adjust to that need, that critical imperative for inclusivity. And so how are they going to but they're going to need some state and federal help. What's that level of state and federal help, you think, Christina? Or can they achieve it as cities or as maybe regions, as sort of micro regions, the city and then the counties around them? Can they achieve that inclusivity without heavy or robust levels of state and federal support? Because the states are going to be at a crunch, and obviously the federal government is going to need some time. I mean, after we get through this election, the federal government is going to need some time to heal. It all depends on how that all shakes out. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is we need both, right? We need more funding for things like transportation investments and more affordable housing. But, I mean, I think there's also a lot to be done just to ensure that what we do have, even after COVID, during and after COVID, is equitably distributed. So even if we don't have as much money as we would need to fully achieve everything that we want to in our cities, I think just ensuring that our current resources are equitably distributed is at least something that we can do in the meantime. And I really think that happens through advocacy, organizing, on-the-ground efforts to hold leaders accountable to where funds are being spent and where policies are implemented. And I think journalists like yourself are really helping to push these efforts forward in cities across the country.
We're talking with Christina Stacy, a senior research associate, at the Urban Institute. Go to urban.org, check out this recent study that she conducted in conjunction with her colleagues at the Urban Institute, which cities became more and less racially and economically inclusive over the past few years. Go to urban.org. It's a good reading. It's a short read. It won't take you too long, but it's just some good essential reading, and to get some thoughts on what cities like Philadelphia, for example, need to do, how they are ranked. Was Philly on that ranking at all? I didn't see Philly on those top lists, but I don't know if that's something you looked at.
We did look at Philly. Here, let me pull up Philly's page. They weren't in our top or bottom most changed list. And I think, the blog post you're referring to, that is one of, we have a couple of different products, so people can read as much or as little as they'd like. We also have a longer report. But we have an interactive data page where you can go pull up any city you'd like. And I'm pulling up Philly's right now. And so, for instance, Philly right now says in 2016, the city ranked 188th out of 274 cities on overall inclusion.
Wow.
And it was 195th on economic inclusion and 166th on racial inclusion. And actually, the city became a little less inclusive over the past few years, from 185 to 188th in overall inclusion. That's not too much of a jump, and
Yeah,
some of these data
I'm sure some folks at City Hall are not liking the sound of that. So, but no, I think that's important. I think they need to know. Yeah.
And sometimes, these metrics don't necessarily say that leaders aren't doing enough. I mean, I think we can use them to help create policies and programs that can move the needle. But sometimes it's just economic forces that cause some of these changes. So I don't think we should, initially blame leaders, but I think we can use them moving forward to identify areas in need of improvement.
Right. No, that's a very good point. With those key indicators, like, list those out, like those key indicators that are there like top 5 indicators that you're looking at when you're making these types of analyses? And are you going to continue this? Is this going to be like an effort that you will all do over the next few years? I mean, like, just every few years you're going to just draw out, like, okay, let's see who's become more inclusive, let's see who's become less inclusive.
Yeah, that's the goal. And actually, the release we just did was an update. A couple years ago, we released the first ranking list with a report. So this one was an update, and we're hoping to update it as frequently as we can. I think post-pandemic is going to be really important. But so we look at 4 measures for economic inclusion, which are income segregation, so the likelihood that someone is to live near someone else of a similar income level. So how, segregated the city is in terms of income levels. We look at housing costs, so rent burden. We look at working poor families, so the percent of families in the city who had someone who worked full-time in the past year, but they're still in poverty. And then we looked at the high school dropout rate as kind of a measure of service in the city. And then for racial inclusion, we look at just diversity, so people of color as a share of the population. And then we look at racial segregation, so how segregated the city is in terms of race and ethnicity. Then we look at racial homeownership gaps, so the difference between the percent of people of color who own their home versus percent of white residents who own their home. The poverty gap, similar measure, but looking at poverty, and then a racial education gap. So, these are mostly from the census, the American Community Survey, so we could look back over time. But we also encourage cities to use these data points as just a starting point for really digging in more to what's most important in your city and working with those residents who have been historically excluded from decision making to decide what metrics are important and what you want your vision for an equitable or inclusive city to be in the future, so you can really work towards that specific goal. These are kind of just a starting point.
Yeah. You had like some building blocks. You had about 8 building blocks in the study, ways that cities can recover from COVID and become more inclusive. One building block that stood out for me, something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I've been asking different leaders in the city of Philadelphia about, with respect to, we're dealing with a very severe gun violence crisis in the city right now. We're nearing about 400 homicides. We haven't even reached the end of 2020 yet. Recruit partners across sectors. I think that's just very important. We don't talk about that enough. I know in Philly we're not talking about it enough, including resident groups, the media, and business leaders. Yeah, talk about that, about the need for partnerships, especially those public-private partnerships your business, if you have a business community, a chamber of commerce, you want them to get in on that. You want them to make those investments too. You want them to be partnered up and make sure they're on the same page and say, hey, we as a city are going inclusive. We need you as businesses to go inclusive as well.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely important. And it's not just businesses, it's universities and all of the different kind of private, or in some cases those are public entities that really need to work together towards an inclusive future. On the transportation example, I think a great example is that some cities have worked with their universities in the town to have the students take public transit, and then that helps subsidize the transit for the rest of the city. Whereas in other cities, the universities don't want to buy into that because their students are afraid of their safety on the public transit, or they're concerned about other issues of not having full control over transit. But if all of those universities came together, and if the city brought them all together to really to all invest together in the public transit, then the entire system could be lifted up. So I think it's so important, and not just public, private, and I mean, I cannot emphasize enough, like community groups, organizers, the people who are really on the ground talking with really have their pulse on the real lived experience of the people who are affected most by this. That's really the most important partner through all this, right? But then public-private partnerships, and just across sectors and disciplines, right? Like, the education people need to be talking to the housing people, because where you live impacts your educational outcomes, right? The housing people need to be talking to the transportation people, because you might put in a new train stop that then makes the neighborhood unaffordable and displaces low-income people. So all these groups need to work together towards a big shared goal and make sure that equity and inclusion are a part of every decision, not just a side project or a side, side group.
No, we've been talking with Christina Stacy, Senior Research Associate Fellow at the Urban Institute. Go to urban.org for more information. Also to check out, this is a really good, instructive list of cities that became more and less racially and economically inclusive over the past few years. You go to that study. Also, they have an interactive map that's showing kind of ranking many other cities as well throughout the U.S., including Philadelphia. Philadelphia not ranking so well, so we'll talk about that. I'm sure we'll be sharing that data with some of our leaders here on Reality Check WURD. But it's good to have Christina on with us today. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, this is good work. Thanks again. All right, let's take a break, and then when we come back on the other side, we have phone lines open, 215-634-8065. I know we had a few callers. We might have lost them before we went to break, before we had Christina on. 215-634-8065, 866-361-0900 here on Reality Check. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. But let's be clear, this election is about building this country back better. And that's exactly what Joe and I will do. Bring back critical supply chains so the future is made in America. Build on the Affordable Care Act. And finally, offer caregivers the dignity, the respect, and the pay they deserve. We'll protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. Root out systemic racism in our justice system, and pass a new Voting Rights Act that will ensure every voice is heard and every voice is counted. We have a chance to choose a better future for our country.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Hi, I'm Dr. Heidi Seropoulos. If you're on Medicare, you should know that many Independence Blue Cross Medicare Advantage plans have a $0 copay for primary care physician visits and telemedicine medical doctor visits. All our plans have $0 in-network COVID-19 testing and treatment, and the largest network of doctors and hospitals in our area.
Call 833-848-0762 today. TTY-TDD 711. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or visit us online at ibxmedicare.com/doctors. Independence Blue Cross offers Medicare Advantage plans with a Medicare contract. Enrollment in Independence Medicare Advantage plans depends upon contract renewal. Independence Blue Cross offers products through its subsidiaries Independence Hospital Indemnity Plan, Keystone Health Plan East, and QCC Insurance Company, independent licensees of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association.
New Voices for Reproductive Justice is registering Black women and their families in Philly to vote. The general election is on November 3rd. You can register to vote online at rock.vote/New Voices. That's rock.vote/New Voices. The deadline to register is October 19th. If you need assistance registering to vote, visit newvoicesrj.org.
2020 is the year of voter options. We have many different ways to exercise one of the most important activities in our lifetime. Some of us might be voting by mail, but the rest of us can still vote safely while masked up and social distancing in person at your local polling locations. If you're in Philadelphia, learn more about where your polling location might be at either votespa.com or philadelphiavotes.com. For more information on how to vote in Pennsylvania, visit states.aarp.org/Pennsylvania. Vote early.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900, 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. Also some folks on Twitter responding to our earlier conversation with Stefan Hankin about black voters. Just issues, challenges with black voters still, particularly as we're in the final stretch before Election Day, and there's some concerns about black men bucking for Trump in this election, and I actually write about that. I put out a piece about that at our companion magazine, Reality Check's companion magazine, the B Note. Check it out. It's actually making the rounds. Quite a few people have been reading it this morning on Twitter. It's been kind of hitting a viral stride. Go to thebnote.com, THEBE note.com, and the piece that essentially riffed on, the title of the piece is "Black Men Voters Are Not the Kids in the Back of the Classroom." Black men voters are not the kids in the back of the classroom. Yeah, there are concerns there. They're warranted about the black vote this year, and particularly about black male voters and how many might go for Trump. But don't put all the blame on black men. And people have been doing that since 2016, and there would be consequences. I have been warning people for the past several years, like, be careful how you talk about black men. Just because a small minority of black men, a relatively small minority of black men, happened to vote for Trump in the 2016 election, at the end of the day, an overwhelming majority of black male voters did support Hillary Clinton. But the way that conversation was framed over the past few years, there was all this vitriol and all this hate and exiling of black male voters. And see, look, it caught up with us. It's caught up with us. And so now people don't know what to do. People are scrambling, and we've got those hard numbers. And, don't get mad. I know some folks out there are mad because they're like, the Biden campaign Democrats are now stumping very hard for white voters to convert white Trump 2016 voters. They're trying to get white women voters in the suburbs. And why aren't they focused on us? It's like, well, they're going to have to do, at the end of the day, they got to win the election. So, yeah, they're going to have to perform some outreach as much as they can and show the contrast between Biden and Trump to white voters, because they've got some very alarming, very troubling black voter support, lack thereof numbers coming from the black electorate. So to make up for that loss or for that potential gap, where are you going to get the votes from? Where else are you going to get the votes from? So, it's just because at the end of the day, politics is a game of addition, and they're not going to be worried about the policy calculus until after they win the election. You can't really worry about the policy calculus right now because they have to first win the election. They're not in power. They're not running the government right now. So just some real concerns there. 215-634-8065. Real quick, on that 94 crime bill, Stephen Love, a listener, was saying, folks so conveniently failed to mention that there were lots of black pastors, legislators, and citizens who supported the 1994 crime bill because crime was out of control at that time. But, let's make Biden the bad guy. And then Harry Lopez at Bed-Stuy Ready responded, "You're so right. A very inconvenient fact that avoided when talking about the crime bill. But if you lived in, for example, New York City in the 90s with over 2,000 murders in 2 years in a row, you'll go to extremes for safety. They remember the bill, yet not the circumstances that gave rise to it. Dark times." It was very dark times back then. Let me go to Woody out of the barbershop calling for a reality check. Woody?
Yeah, can you hear me this time, Charles?
Yeah, we can hear you, definitely. I know we had some phone line problems. I think we worked them out.
Okay,
Woody? All
no
right.
problem. Listen, I just wanted to say to you that the gentleman, Defon, he had statistical analysis on black male voters.
Right.
And I was kind of shocked to hear the numbers where they are. I would ask him a question, though. What about the non-voters, those who aren't going to vote at all? Does he do a statistic on that?
He
Black
does,
males.
actually. Yeah, if you go to, and we put that up at the bnote.com, the THEBE note.com, but let me go to that real quick for you. There are about 9% of black voters overall. I don't know about black male voters. I don't see that specifically, so I have to ask them
The reason
offline.
I was asking black male voters was because a lot of them, as I stated, not able to use the new machines. And I'm thinking of those brothers who never really got an opportunity, as I've stated so many times, because they're slow readers or non-readers, and they were able to do the state straight tickets. But there'll be a lot of, that's what I'm thinking, those people that are not going to vote because of that reason.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That becomes an issue. So if you can kind of let him know about that. Number two, as it relates to black males, as it relates to the news media, we're number one in everything that's bad. And there's a lot of bad things that are happening, but they promote it very highly when anything happens as it relates to black males. However, you recall Donald Trump, I believe, just a couple of days ago, made a comment that bad things happen in Philadelphia. Well, there's a touring company that's being allowed to come in, and they're going to tour these bad places in Philadelphia as a tour. I think the guy's name is Tim Macular, and he has a touring company, but he's going to do that behind what Trump said. Bad things happen in Philadelphia. So people are going to be making money on all our sorrow and all other problems that are happening to us here in Philly. I just wish we had a tour that would help prevent some of the problems instead of for people to come and look at how bad things are in Philadelphia. I just think that that's not good. It's a touring company. The city's allowing it. I think they're going to do it on Thursday when you guys are doing council. But I'd like you to check in on that.
Yeah, I will, and I think that that's just a bad move. I think city leaders should come because it's
you're going to make money
you're making money. It's exploitative too, right? It's like okay. Let's get let's go on safari. It's like when people go to certain parts of Africa and go on safari. It's the exact same kind of dynamic, same kind of thing. Or let's go on a hunting expedition. It really is. It smells of that, and so I'm a bit stunned that like city leaders or someone like Mayor Kenny, particularly when you're in the middle of a gun violence crisis, would not come out stronger against that or more vocal against that.
Well, they're allowing them to do it, and I think they were running it on a test trial to see how it's going to run. But I don't think this is a good timing for it at all. Personally.
No, it's not. I agree with you on that. Thanks for that, Woody. So that's I'll definitely follow up on that. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. Let me go to Gary out of Southwest.
Hey,
Gary?
Charles, how are you?
Hey, what's happening? All right.
Hey, I'm good, man. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Maurice had said earlier. We definitely have to get out and vote. However, we have to hold the Democratic Party to a high level of responsibility, man, because they've been letting us down for a long time. And now I just want to go on until we talk about the school system, the charter schools. Actually, in reality, I'm not a big advocate of charter schools because charter schools, the money they get, that's still our public money. They're able to operate under a separate set of rules, and if you have problem so-called youth in that school, they can put you out. However, in the public school system, they can't say, well, we're going to put you out of the public school system. And what I'm saying is that I remember as a young man growing up, we had certain schools that were for that were problems, disciplinary problems or whatever, to separate them so the other children could learn.
Oh.
Now, Eli Broad, if you're familiar with his name, he's the one that orchestrated this thing about charter schools. And one thing he said schools should be run like a business. That's a problem right there.
Yeah.
So when we look at the charter school, here's another issue. I feel public school teachers, they need to be paid a lot more for what they do. I'm talking about the good ones.
The good ones, yeah.
The overwhelming are good. You have some ones that slack. However, they're with your child during the day more time than you spend with your child. My aunt was a school teacher, and she actually would bring in food and clothing for some of the students because they were coming from some impoverished situations. She would take them shopping. Now, this thing with the charter schools, you go out to Montgomery County. Do they have charter schools in Montgomery County?
Yeah.
They do?
You said did they have charter schools in Montgomery County, right?
Charter schools out in Montgomery County.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe I don't know the exact names of them, but if I'm not mistaken, they do. I might be wrong on that, but if I'm not mistaken, yeah.
From what I know, they don't really have that. You know, when you were out there, like I think earlier one of the callers was talking about, you know, they have the high property taxes. Also, the people make that kind of money.
Yeah.
So they have schools. You think you're on a college campus. Why are our children, talking about Philadelphia in particular, are forced to go into these dilapidated buildings? And this is before the pandemic. I mean, with the lead, asbestos, bathrooms overflowing and flooded with water. That's disgraceful. That our children have to go in these type of buildings, and then you expect them to come in that building and sit down and learn.
Yeah.
There was an article about some children eating paint chips falling from the ceiling and with some of our schools.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to say this. I have never missed a vote in my life since I turned 18. And I'm going to hold my nose, and I'm going to vote this time, of course. However, we have to demand and have higher expectations from our elected officials and stop treating them like celebrities, because that's what we're doing. Now, if you do a survey, see what schools their children go to. I bet you they don't go to one of these schools with lead paint dropping all on their desk.
No.
Okay? So we have to do better. This election, we definitely got to get this, whatever he is, out of the White House. But going forward, Charles, and especially in this city of Philadelphia, the poorest big city in the country, and we keep allowing this because people look like us and they're sitting in office, that has to stop. I'm sorry. It has to stop. Thank you, Charles.
Hey, no, thank you, Gary. I appreciate those thoughts. We need to continue to talk about that. Let me go through some of these phone calls here. We have Calvin out of Delaware calling in for a reality check. Calvin.
Charles, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? All right.
Good. Thanks for taking my call. You know, those numbers are very alarming. I mean, wow. You know, I mean, and like I can remember back in 2016 when Trump had said that, you know, he thanked black people for not voting.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like I can remember that, and you know, so then you have like Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't vote. I read somewhere where like 20% of Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States are black folks. So that's like, you know, so this is
quite a few.
I don't know. I mean, these, you know, and then like earlier you were saying something about, you know, with the black men. I was reading something, a demographic where they're saying like these black men in their 20s up into their 40s more likely to vote for Trump. I mean, I'm 70 years old. I mean, no way in the world I'm gonna vote for that man. And then, you know, you black seniors out there, Trump's going after your Social Security. He's going after your Medicare. But
they don't care.
And then too, I think that why would you vote for white supremacists and avowed white supremacists? I just don't understand that. I mean, there's no way in the world I can support that. You know, but I just wanted to just say that. I mean,
I hear you.
What I just said.
And you know, but you know, the assumption here is that like all those folks who are saying, you know, remember now, I mean, polls, you know, can be inaccurate in certain respects because there are people who are either lying to the polls or if they are registered to vote, they probably won't vote, right? So, I mean, could be a lot of people out there saying that, claiming that level of support for Trump who may at the end of the day might not even bother voting, right? Might not even bother, might not have that kind of enthusiasm to go, through the trouble of, putting in that vote for. So that's something that could very well happen. I mean, there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, though, Calvin, I mean, they're alarming numbers. And I don't, I just wonder. Well, based on the conversations I'm having, people are aware of it. Democrats are aware of it. Democrats in the Biden campaign, the DNC, everyone's aware of it. I think because they have very little time to address it. It's once again, it's a dollar short, day late. The best that they can do now is, they're going to have to make a very aggressive pitch to white voters to fill that gap. They're going to have to. They're going to have to. They have no choice. I mean, that's what I would do if I were in their position. Be like, okay, well, you know what? We got the black voters that we need. They will, whomever is not on board at this stage, what can we do? Well, okay, well, let's go on to these other voters that we think we can flip, or that are already flipping as we're talking. And let's make sure that we get them all the way to the polls and just win this thing. And that's what's going on right now. Go ahead, Calvin. You have one last thought?
2 weeks from today, man.
2 weeks
Election
from today.
time, November 3rd, 2 weeks from today.
Yeah. That's
okay?
it.
But again, thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Calvin. Yeah, thanks for sharing that too. Yeah, Black Jehovah's Witnesses account for 27% of that religious sect. 27% of Jehovah's Witnesses are black in the United States. So just to kind of throw that out there, 36% are white and 32% are Hispanic. And Jehovah's Witnesses, I think, make up about 0.8% of the U.S. adult population. So just to kind of throw that out there to you. Okay, let me take a break, and I will take some more phone calls. 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. We have George out of Center City, D out of West Philly, and Jacob out of Albany. They'll come next after this break here on Reality Check Tuesday.
Hello, I'm former Mayor John Street.
And I'm Mayor Street's son, Senator Sharif Street.
You know, I've been out here fighting for what's right for a long, long time, but I can't think of an election more important than the one that's happening right now.
We all know we have to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but we also have a couple of hometown heroes that we need to elect.
Nina Ahmad served as the City of Philadelphia Deputy Mayor, and it will be a welcome change to have a strong woman of color go to Harrisburg to fight for all of us.
We also have working class hero John Kane running for state senate. He's a blue-collar guy, ready to fight for better-paying jobs and accessible health care. I'd love to have John Kane join me in the state senate.
This election is just too important. So when you go out, vote for Joe and Kamala.
Don't forget to vote for Nina Ahmad for Auditor General and John Kane for state senator.
This message is paid for by the Friends of Sharif Street.
WURD Radio presents the following information to help you navigate the upcoming election.
This is Charles Ellison, host of Reality Check on WURD. Are you a Philly area voter who received your mail-in ballot but suddenly decided you want to vote in person? If you return your complete ballot to the county election office by October 27th, you may not vote in person on election day. However, if you don't return your complete mail-in ballot to your county before October 27th, you can go to a polling place, surrender your unvoted ballot and voter's declaration envelope, sign a statement, and vote on the machines. Keep following us at onWURD on Twitter, Facebook.com/4WURD, and #WURD on politics for constant updates on election 2020. And remember, vote early.
Stay informed and vote. For more from Charles Ellison, tune in Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. or visit WURDradio.com.
Reverend Tyler, with November 3rd around the corner, do you know how you'll be voting this year?
Dr. Callahan, I requested my mail-in ballot, and I'm returning it the day it comes in the mail.
That's perfect, because we can't leave anything to chance this year.
Already received your mail-in ballot? You're just a few simple steps away from turning your mailbox into a ballot box. Here's how. After selecting your candidates, place your marked ballot into the small secrecy envelope and seal it. It's a 2-envelope process, so then you'll place the small secrecy envelope into the larger one. Make sure to seal that one too. Sign and date it, and then it's as simple as dropping it in your mailbox, no postage necessary, or returning it to your county election office. And if you still want to sign up to vote by mail or find out where to drop off your mail-in ballot, visit votespa.com.
I'm not waiting until November 3rd. I'm returning my mail-in ballot the day it comes in the mail.
Or you can return your ballot to your county election office.
I've got my plan. Make your plan to vote today.
Paid for by Power Interfaith.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
Okay, let's go to George out of Center City calling in for a reality check. George?
You got ordered apart. Depart. I got to see that part work.
George, we got you online. What's happening? George?
Yes. How you doing, Charles?
Hey, what's happening? All right.
Good. You know, it was funny with you and Maurice. I was really laughing about that. Mm-hmm. One day you should let Maurice finish and then answer it. You know, it's like it's real interesting to hear the both of y'all. It's really, really interesting, you know. But, you know, the second thing is, for Gary, public school is a charter school. You know, it is a charter school. A charter school is a public school. And the reason that we have different charter schools in the city here is because that all the older schools were torn down or either used, and they just went on to make charter schools. But if you look at the charter schools, all the PILs and the asbestos and all, that was only like maybe 5 schools in the whole city. So therefore the whole thing get a bad rap for it. But if you go look at it now, since the pandemic, all the schools that had asbestos in them, most of them are clear and fixed most of the plumbing in all of them. So they put a lot of money into those schools that they're going to end up selling pennies on a dollar. You know, so that. The third thing, Charles, is that, you know, it's very, these special people here in Philadelphia from the Northwest is like, it's really special to the point that they could cause Biden a whole lot. And the reason they can cause Biden a whole lot, if Obama comes in here tomorrow and they rush him up to the Northwest, you think they was hot about them doing that with Kamala, with Harris. They're going to really be hot with that. They should stop that. They're, like I always say, that's a very selfish group of elected officials up there who think they got all the power and all the say-so in the city. And that was once upon a time when they had, you know, the wards that can bring in the numbers. But now you have a whole lot of wards that bring in the numbers. And people, you know, they need to start respecting more people in the city instead of just always thinking of everything for themselves. It's just not right. And people kiss up and suck up and do all that there. It means nothing. That group of people up there, that's when you talk about a special group of Negroes that don't want to see nobody with nothing but themselves, always in the room thinking about themselves, never their constituents. Let me give you a prime example about the Northwest. They were so concerned about their constituents. You know all the driveways and everything, where the city drive in the back and pick up trash and tear up their pavements and everything. They would fix it. Not once. Money been allocated twice, 3 times up there to do that. Each time those elected officials up there transferred the money to somewhere else, you know. So you look at things like that there and you say, just how much do they bring to the district? They bring stuff to the district for their friends and family. Like the Northwest controls the thing at the school board. They got more jobs down there than anybody. Contracts, they got more contracts down there than anybody. And all that stuff is a matter of public information. So
that's true. Hey, George, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you short, but I actually got to let you go because I got to take in some other calls. But no, some interesting points. Yeah, we'll be watching. It'll be really interesting to watch kind of how Philly welcomes President Obama. And let me go to D out of West Philly because I don't want to lose folks who've been waiting here. D, how are you doing? D, can you hear us? Okay, D. Jacob out of Olney calling for a reality check.
Hey, what's up, my brother?
How you doing, sir?
All right, how you doing? Yeah, you know, it's good, Charles, that the majority of American people know a phony when they see one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the heads, I was listening at one of the heads of the white evangelicals, right? They got a pact now that's telling their white evangelicals to not vote for 45 because they see. Matter of fact, he said that they're embarrassed by him, you know. And he said himself, the only time he called on God is when he feels like he's, you know, he wants. In other words, it's about his who gonna vote for him. It's not that he's really interested in religious people or whatever, you know. But quickly, you had the guy from the charter schools, the leader, right?
Right, the new executive, Lenny McAllister, who used to be a contributor here on Reality Check WRD. He's now the executive director of the state's charter school.
Right.
Collective.
And I work for a charter school. My sister has a charter school. So, but the lady DeVoe, right?
Mm-hmm.
She knew nothing about. She wasn't in education. It's almost like if I ran a company, right? If I wanted somebody over my finance department, they would have to be skilled at finances, right? It almost seems like Trump, when he has people in office, he put all of their names in a hat, shake it up, and then he just grab his hand and then pick out a name. Okay, you're gonna be over housing. Not that you have any housing experience, but I'm gonna put you over housing. He dig in the hat again, pull somebody else. He puts unqualified people into these positions. How can you not fail doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It doesn't even make sense, but it shows the
and really, I mean, I've heard sources at Housing and Urban Development, for example. Actually, Ben Carson doesn't run HUD; his wife does.
Oh, ain't that something? Well, maybe
his wife was worked in real estate, and you know, so that's how. I've heard that.
But
from
I mean, he ain't qualified, but he got the spot. So again, that's doomed to fail. So.
Yeah.
But again, that's why we see everything failing. So it ain't no surprise to me. But again,
that's true.
Like somebody just said, I already voted. You know, so really my vote is in. But I'm thinking it's going to be one of the greatest upsets in the history of presidential elections. I believe that.
Yeah.
Because people see this man for who he is, and even some of his own people, they ain't going to say it right out. But I believe they're going to go in there and pull Biden. They ain't going to tell nobody. But they sick of this man, just like everybody. The whole world's sick of him. European people sick of him.
Yeah, everybody's sick of him. Yeah, see, people are exhausted. Yeah, that's true.
You.
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate you. Let me go to A out of West Philly, calling in for a reality check. A?
Charles, thank you so much for having me on your platform here. Lynn, I always say fight with the heart of Black Panther. Even when I spoke to you when you were at the, forget where we were at and where we met, it's like, you know, we're in trouble. But bottom line is that you have the LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter movement, everybody who marched, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, they all march for these things, but we all need to be together on one accord, is that we need to fight to take him out. Don't be divisive. And that's why I say, talk about the end game, is because one, they did not who the enemy was, and number two, they all fought together. And that's why I call them Panel 45. And anybody who says that I'm voting for Panel 45, say first, I like the fact what he did for 4 years. I like that he wiped out and snapped his finger and killed 100,000 people already. I like the fact that he's going to provide health care for preconditioned people who the next year, when that policy comes in place, not going to be able to get your medication. And number three, I like the fact that he has a slogan, Make America Great. And so the FOP is supporting him, and so you defund the police, but you don't want to take him out. That's weeding this thing.
Yeah.
It is bizarre.
Yeah, I don't get it. And people's primary motivation or excuse for that is a bill from nearly 30 years ago. Like
30 years, you want to go back in time when all you have to do is go back 4 years when you allowed them to get in. So don't blame what happened in the civil rights movement. Don't blame the old folk. Blame the fact that, number one, back 4 years ago, you weren't registered. You said, I'm going to take my ball and I'm not voting. You are registered, and you said, okay, I'm going to use my registration and vote for 45. And then you want to confuse the people who are 18 years old and 21 years old and don't tell them that I did the wrong thing and then apologize for allowing them to get in situations they're in now.
Yeah.
And what we also need to do
is
real
cruddy.
Get the beehive, get the swarm, and everybody who has all these followers to let them know that they need to go vote and stop. You got 50% that's out. You got all these for Shaquille O'Neal. And
that's true.
It started off with Kanye. I'm sorry, Kanye West started off with him.
I gotta let you go. Hey, thanks so much. I gotta let you because we actually have to go to break. Thank you for them comments. I appreciate you. We have to wrap this Tuesday edition of Reality Check. Want to make space, make room for The Source with Andrea Lawful-Sanders. That's going to be coming up next here on WURD. I want to thank Jordan Booth. Thank Jordan Booth when you get a chance. Doing a fantastic job. The board is still. He's sitting in for Troy Wilmore, who will be back later on. And I want to thank the rest of the WURD staff as well. I'm Charles Ellison. Philly and beyond, I want you to stay sharp, stay smart, but more importantly, stay safe out there. God willing, I will be talking to you tomorrow, Wednesday, 10 a.m. sharp, here on WURD. Keep your radio dial locked into WURD. You're headed to The Source in a moment. Take care. Have a good evening.